Wow, that's a lot of people. Hello and welcome to Lorelines, Fowl and Hawk speaking. Today is our long-awaited 50th episode and 1-year anniversary stream. We are joined by two wonderful guests, the charming and erudite Rookery, and the ever-knowledgeable, even-handed, and also charming Anonymous.
What a great introduction. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
my bio.
We're really happy to have you guys join us. It's been
You use
months.
big words.
Yeah, big words. I just wanted to say, our only goal today is to have a fun social stream. Lore's on the table, but feel free to divulge, and share your adventures in life and in-game, and welcome everybody. Yay!
Yay, welcome.
Woo.
Welcome.
Hey,
Thank you so much. Great to be back. And congratulations on 50 episodes in 1 year. That's amazing.
How many weeks are in a year?
That means we only
Okay.
took 52.
You asked me here.
We took off like Thanksgiving and Christmas, I believe.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you asked me here, to theoretically talk lore. You asked us here for lore. I can't do week math. I don't know that weekly math.
Wait, did they invite you for lore?
Oh, Moose, did they not invite you for lore?
Well, I got a DM that was like,
We
"Hey,
invited
are you
Moose.
free Sunday?" And I was like, "What time Sunday?" And then I saw a tweet like, "Rook and Manani Moose at 2 on Sunday," and I was like, "Well, that was easy."
We're just gonna take you out for dinner.
It's a date, guys.
Oh wow, I would have dressed a lot better if I knew this was a date. But you know what? I think we're all the way we are, and we're in a place of honesty right now, and I feel really good about this.
Place of honesty.
Well, and Mouth's already dead. We're off to a good start.
Fantastic.
As is tradition.
Sludge says 50, that's 225s.
Wow.
Chat's great.
So, I don't think we've gotten a chance to talk to either of you since Endwalker came out. What did you guys think?
Oh geez, are we going to be doing how many episodes are we doing? Are we recording 5 back to back today? Because
That's a
We're
fucking
still not done with ours.
We're on
To be
part
fair,
9.
our last 10 episodes were Endwalker coverage. So
Yeah, we did so many Elpis alone, just episodes.
both good and
Yeah.
bad.
yes, poor
Some very
Moose and I.
intense.
Moose
Ask
and I have
Ayumi
also
about time
been.
travel.
No, we're not going over this, and I'm not recording another bit.
Moose and I have
okay.
also been going through the Endwalker lore with Gamerscape too. I mean, it was such an expansion, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable. I've been saying to everybody that I think for me it had some of the highest highs and the lowest lows, but only in the sense that there's so much to discuss, so many different facets that might have resonated for certain people, so many things that I think no matter what were incredible high points in this franchise. And for me, even though I think it has fostered maybe some of the most discussion in the community, to me it has been one of the most impactful expansions I think I've ever played in an MMO. I've had so many emotions. I mean, yes, Elpis, oh my gosh, one of those highest highs, right? Holy cow, so many cool things with the Ancients. So many incredible, moving, emotional messages. So yeah, I mean, Endwalker has been incredible, but it is a huge thing you could talk about and have been talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Part 1, part 2, part 2, part 2, 3.
Yeah.
It was a long. Highest highs and lowest lows is such a good way to put it. The way that I'd been thinking about it until now is that I feel like Ishikawa managed to distill everything I love and hate about Final Fantasy tradition and JRPGs in general into this one perfect game that I also kind of hate.
Yeah, right.
Same.
Moose,
I
I'm on
honestly
this
feel
exactly
that a
same.
lot.
Yeah. That I love and
She-
actually kind of is.
And in playing Elpis, she asked us, "Do you guys play Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross?"
Oh, it just got me more hopeful that one day we might see that long fabled crossover.
I'm waiting. I'm still waiting for it.
I was talking
But-
with the cast a little bit before the stream, and for me, Endwalker was such a paradigm shift. Even things that we thought were established facts were just kind of dismantled
Stop it.
in Endwalker. And yet, even with any criticisms I have, I'm still shedding tears during the Phase 2 transition of Endsinger. Sorry, it's ingrained from my Final Fantasy IV first game ever.
As
It's just there. It's just pure nostalgia trip.
as someone who was really trying to study and figure out the lore from like 1.0, I think it hit me around Stormblood that the days of being able to count on what you know to be what you know and that they're never going to change are over. But even still, Endwalker surprised me with some of kind of the deep cuts it did on how to rearrange lore.
Yeah, I mean, it is a risky move to, in the final expansion of a culmination of 10 years of story, introduce absolute curveballs and entirely new concepts that, like, revolutionize the context of your game. And I mean, honestly, I think the risk was well worth it. I mean, you were talking about the transition with Endsinger. I mean, there are so many moments from this expansion where the emotional messages, oh, the Answers walk, anytime Answers plays, anything with Venat, I like literally just devolved into a sobbing, incoherent mess. And even some of the ideas and mechanics and vehicles that were just kind of introduced. I mean, obviously, we had everything from Dynamis to the Matea to all these different, you know, concepts that here at the very end were thrown in a sense. And so many people are going to have their own reactions to that, which I think is good. I mean, overall, I honestly love to see a game that isn't afraid to introduce new ideas, because it is tough when it comes to an MMO when you are telling stories for such a long, protracted period of time. If you decide to do a linear narrative, right? It's like, how do you really deal with that while also keeping it fresh? So for me, the risk is well worth it. And even if there are areas that, yes, like even I critique or discuss about this expansion, I mean, there are so many ideas that I think give them a lot to build off of.
You just like kind of changed the way I think about it a little bit, because I was sitting here like, well, that's just like, that's the form of the JRPG. You cross the point of no return and suddenly it's depressed birds and space clocks, and that's just like how it is.
I mean, that's also fair.
You just said it revolutionized the context of the game, and you're right, because like that's what I think makes it part of the new wave of Final Fantasy 2, because it revolutionized the context of the game. It wasn't just like, hey, why is that clown here and why does he want to be God?
Yep,
absolutely.
And I think it greatly expanded on where they can go from here by opening up basically not only the shards, but all of space, and saying, you know, this game could go on for forever if they wanted to.
The number one Yoshida anxiety I keep joking about.
Suffering from success.
He is so nervous that we're going to get to the end of Endwalker and be like, there it is! Main season is over, everything else is just extras. And like, the level to which he's taken the challenger anxiety to a new level is just so funny to me, because like even Emmett Selk shows up to let you know that there's more game coming.
That's really great.
It tells you like the next 6 expansions.
At some point, I mean, it's funny because I think many of us, like, looking at this, we keep track of all the things, we, you know, pay attention to what's being said, the interviews, right? It's like you start going, like, why do they feel the need to reiterate this so much? The same with when they were talking about how there would be the, like, scaling adjustments coming into, you know, like the numerical adjustments and all that kind of stuff. Coming into Endwalker, and it's like every single live letter, we just got this entire PowerPoint with Yoshida, like, the numbers will change. Do not panic. The numbers will change.
There's a stat squish. Don't freak out.
Your DPS will look smaller. Please don't hurt me. It's not true.
It's not actually smaller. Numbers aren't real. And
you think to yourself, like, why in the world would anyone need to reiterate something that much? And then you, like, look at the internet and you look at Reddit and people are like, Endwalker, this is the end? And you're like, no, oh my gosh, everybody, no, it's not. They're
gonna nerf my DPS at the end? I can't kill God feeling powerful?
Two potency less? By God, quit.
So
whenever they nerf my class.
To be fair, I didn't feel the stat squish until I tried to help a friend level Blue Mage after Endwalker came out. And there I felt it. Everywhere else, I felt better. But that one thing, I was like, oh, now I feel it.
They did a good job with it, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I generally haven't noticed it all that much, outside of maybe like Crystal Tower raids taking a little longer.
I'm maining Paladin, so I didn't really notice it, aside from just being like, oh, I do less damage than all the other tanks.
This is a question for Moose.
Changed it.
Do you remember Heavy Shot hitting for 140 damage in A Realm Reborn?
No. Wait.
Numbers were really low in ARR. Anybody else?
Like
I
I
remember
was.
starting a new-
accuracy.
I think
I
I
remember
remember
starting
that.
a
Yeah.
new character and being like, "What? I'm only doing 5 damage. Oh my gosh!"
I can't tell if you just retrieved a memory or gave me confabulation, but yeah, I feel like I do remember that suddenly.
I mean, I remember accuracy. I remember getting right side tank gear. I remember resistances, choosing the correct god at the beginning to get a resistance.
Oh, geez, I remember that too.
I remember
I will
gun mage
say-
and mage.
Bard being able
I
to
will
put
have
down
to say-
fire.
I have to
I mean,
say, I really
can you-
appreciate how much time the devs and creators and writers put into improving the quality of life of the players. It means so much to me.
Yes. I mean, can you remember? I literally was having to explain to somebody on stream recently because they were asking me about, like, I heard this thing about how you used to have to, like, I don't know, go get a bunch of classes to, like, play one class.
Yup, you
And I
did.
was like, oh, yes, you did. And also, you had skill points. So you had to allocate skill points into things, which really didn't affect much of anything. But then you
I
also
forgot
had to
about
go
those.
around and, like, get those different classes and, like, trying to figure out how to become a paladin or whatever you wanted to be and going, what do I have to get? And what do I have to get it leveled to in order to become my actual form that I want to play in this game?
And it wasn't just
And-
that; it was you had to include
Yeah.
cross-class abilities. So if you
Yup.
wanted to be a white mage, you had to get black mage to 35 to get swift cast, so you could rest.
Yeah, I
people.
started I
Yep.
started getting into casters and was like, oh, I have to do black mage. Oh.
Wait, am I the
Yes.
only person here who played when there were physical levels?
No, I did.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, because like that was the first thing that came to mind when you were like, "Do you remember?" Because the only thing I really remember about like 1.0 combat is the fact that you couldn't repair gear unless you had broken pieces of the gear. So, like, in order to repair velveteen pants, you
remember
needed
that.
torn velveteen spetches.
Yeah.
So this
Oh
was
my
like,
god!
yeah, you
That's
needed.
horrifying.
So you needed to carry hundreds of items to repair your stuff, because if you had like bronze shoes, you needed a bronze nugget, and if you had velveteen pants, you needed velveteen spetches, and like if your accessories were broken, it didn't change their stats at all because they didn't have any stats that were affected by it. So I didn't repair my gear for like 2 straight years, and every time someone was like, "Hey, your gear's broken," I'm like, "It's just my accessories."
You're like,
it's
who
fine."
cares?
Yeah, I mean,
Do you
honestly-
recall do you recall the glamour prism classified by crafter classes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I still have
Pretty
some of those on my
1-5.
retainer for some reason, and I'm not sure why I'm holding on to them.
You can trade them in. Like, there's an NPC for it, I think.
I mean, they're a rare relic of the past now. You just have to
Ah,
hold on
yeah.
to them.
Yeah, like belts.
Yeah, I've actually got like the commemorative coin and all the items from the Darnus fight for the same reason.
Oh, I actually did hang on to my my cat girl's velveteen belt from 1.0.
Oh, the belt.
The red one. It was like a sash.
What
Yeah.
are these
Yeah,
belts you speak of?
So in 1.0, not only were there belts, but they were displayed on your character. So you could glamour your belt as well as everything else just by wearing the item. So I had a velveteen shawl that I would wear with my my dragoon, I guess it was. And so she had boots and shorts and a shawl.
Nice.
It was cool. And then the scale armor. That's the one thing I lament about the belts disappearing. It's not now they don't matter, but I'm sad that they disappeared as a glamour item.
Question
It
is,
makes more sense why they had them on the left side if they were once visible. I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
yeah, the belts actually used to have a few different displays on them, and they were like one had bags and one was cloth, and you could kind of mix and match a little bit to get like a little extra, but I don't think it was worth the polys that they were spending on it.
No doubt.
I'm reading a question here. Was the Darnus fight fun at least? And that is a complicated question.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Is this one of those how much of a masochist are you things?
the hard version, yeah. Like the hard version was, Yoshida described it as the hardest fight that their engine was capable of running. And on one hand, that sounds intimidating, but on the other hand, know that their engine was not capable of a lot. So it was still pretty slow, but it felt very epic for what you'd been through so far and how it worked. But it was also really like frustratingly, intimidatingly hard, because you could get one shot. And I think the one we won on, I was solo healing on white mage with like the Moogle weapon.
Oh Jesus.
Oh God, you're bringing back awful memories of like bow mages and when ninjas were actually like OP.
And Conjurer actually had all 6 elements.
Yeah, all 6 elements, and they had what was it? Cleric stance.
Oh, I loved cleric.
Ancient magics.
Dancing.
And you had to cross class for everything, and you could have a black mage with res.
I mean, pretty soon here, the days of the outlier MSQ dungeons are going to be over too. Here, 6.1, reworking all of that. I mean, it is so interesting. I think 14 out of like almost any of the MMOs that I play has maybe spent the most time retroactively, like going back and adjusting, changing, overhauling things in such a way that, I mean, like every game will have that to some extent, but it really does seem like 14 has always really focused on making their experience coherent from like beginning to end in a sense. And obviously they have the team to be able to do that. And with all these changes coming up, it is wild to think that there are going to be ages of this game that people just like, don't even know any of this, you know? They'll have never lived through it.
Like
getting
Westwind and Roulette.
Exactly. And then they're going to ask Yoshida, can we have that? Like a classic version of the game?
No.
Oh, God.
Nightmare upon nightmares.
1,000-yard stare.
In truth, I really do appreciate that. Like, it feels weird to know that people are going to have this different experience, but it's a better one, and I want people to get into the game and really enjoy it. I've had too many friends start to play and then sort of lose steam in ARR, and like, so tightening it up is inherently a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
As much as I'm still going to be like, back in my day.
The one thing that like makes me laugh is like the ability bloat and the stat crunch, where they actually start removing and reframing a lot of the old abilities. So I feel like we used to think it was true to be able to say like, you just got to make it through ARR and then it's going to be suddenly really complex. But as we go on and more abilities are culled and more things get added on in the new expansions, I feel like some people are going to be like, I can't believe you said Twintania was hard. You only have like 10 abilities at level 50.
Oh, I'm curious.
With all of these changes and everything, I can now just be even more antisocial than I was before, and just use trust for everything that happened. I'm just kidding. I love you guys.
Well, no, but I see it as them trying to future-proof the game, because the argument that Yoshida made was right. A lot of people are like, "Oh, that's one of the online Final Fantasies. Yeah. It's not a real Final Fantasy game." But by streamlining, season 1 basically, and making it basically single player, they're basically future-proofing the game for people who come along, in 10 years and say, I want to play 14 long after its peak is over, because they're going to keep the servers running indefinitely, because it's a number Final Fantasy game. And they future-proof it for that.
And I like how they chose the term RPG, that you can play alone or with friends, although it kind of left some salt and rubbed into the wound for people who wanted it to be just an MMO.
I mean, it is always a question, right? With MMOs, I mean, inherently by their design, the idea of designing around a world that everyone can interact in and that like content can be made for groups versus something like a solo experience. So like, I do understand why a lot of people, I think, get hesitant about that, because one of the greatest strengths of MMOs as a genre, and I mean, literally what has sort of been the backbone of a lot of their features, mechanics, content, is the idea of how you create something that, can be played together, and not just in like a limited sense where, you just co-op this level together or something, but like a truly open world that you exist in with others. So like I understand, but I mean I agree with everybody. It's like you have to future-proof the game, one, and you have to also just think about the fact that really ultimately at the end of the day, they just want as many people playing this game as possible, and it's better for all of us if that's the case. One, because it's such a great experience, and the story in and of itself is something that you can independently experience and love. And like two, because I mean it is such a great world to be in. And even if you think about the hours that maybe you've logged on and just nobody's online, or queues are 50 minutes long, or like whatever, or more, or you're just trying to level something or do something, or you want to get this alt character through, but every single time you hit that new dungeon, you're on a DPS and you just cannot seem to get in. It's like having those methods where it gives us all different tools to explore the world in different ways is not a bad thing by any means. And they're not overhauling or changing the overall mentality of the game. They're just adding other features in.
Absolutely. I have to add my experience here as well. I was not an MMO guy when I started playing this game. I joined it because it was a Final Fantasy game and because my friends told me, you don't have to do most things with other people and we'll help you with the group content. So that was my foot in the door, and then I got playing it and I found a really good community. I'm all up in it now, of course. But if it hadn't had that single player angle, even back then, I probably would not have given the game a chance. So like, it brings more people in and lets them experience it firsthand. That's a win in my book.
I have a conspiracy theory. There's like a bill coming due for Square Enix right now, that they decided way back in 2000, like we could call it Final Fantasy Online, and then we might not get a lot of people. Like we're not going to get as many people as if we call it Final Fantasy 11. So now they have the bill coming due for, wait, do you shut down a mainline Final Fantasy? Like, can there be a hole in the franchise? Is that allowed? And Yoshida's like looking at the trouble they're having with that concept, trying to get 11 future-proof, trying to get 11 single player, trying to get 11 feasible to do offline. And he's just like, maybe we'll start thinking about that earlier rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad
It's
idea.
very smart, actually.
I actually recently went back and tried to play 11, and it's still a mess, kind of.
I'm still sad they canceled trying to get the mobile version together.
Same.
I would definitely have played it on phone, I think.
I don't know how I would have, but I'd have tried. And I'm really rooting for them to get a single player version of it together one day. I think they can do it.
Yeah, that shouldn't be difficult. I mean, I mean, I'm no expert, but I mean, through what Arden's been telling me and the CD Opera Omnia, I'm been growing more interested in the story of 11. And I have an insanely odd luck when it comes to pulling for characters in of the 11 casts in the CD Opera Omnia. So I'm kind of like, I guess this is telling me that I should learn more about the entire plot.
Yes, it's a sign.
but I mean, in my case, I was so happy to when they said that they were adjusting the entire game for trust system, because when they first announced the trust system for Shadowbringers, I was ecstatic because I'm a lone player, and so yeah, and I didn't mind the slightest when they said they were going to expand to that for the entire game, because that means that I can level my characters without having to wait for other people, and that also means that they're going to be the games, for my personal taste, is going to be more like for example Terra is now, that you can single play Terra if you want, or even Guild Wars 2, that you can single play if you want.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much they can keep doing with the flexibility of that, and this trust system is a huge, I think, first step. Making that something that you can use throughout the whole game is going to be so important. And I mean, it is just so great to see people getting into these kinds of games and these spaces and trying them. And I mean, gosh, if they ever came out with a single player version of 14 where they like did it all on the scale of a Final Fantasy game, like release, like the mainstream single players, I would totally play that too. I mean, like the story has always from the beginning been approached, as they said, as something that they wanted to stand up on its own in the actual Final Fantasy numbered franchise. And I think they totally did that. I haven't played 11 yet myself, but I keep thinking, I should go back. And then I'm like, do I really have the time? I'm already so busy with the MMOs that I play. But I need to at some point, because I would like to see how it all started.
It's a really amazing world that they've built. And also, it is a time vampire to even walk across that world.
Yes,
like it is better every year. They give you more and more quality of life and more shortcuts, but it used to just eat your entire life alive.
So actually, on that note, a couple of months ago when I was playing, I came home from work and I was like, all right, I've got 2 hours to play. I'm going to go level in this zone. And I got there, I killed one thing, and I was like, all right, that's my 2 hours. I got to go to bed.
It's over.
Yeah.
2 hours
There's a
was like
reason.
the amount of time I would spend trying to recruit a party to go far.
Yep.
Yeah, for
Oh.
30 minutes, no less.
I know my partner played it back when it was like, still in its sort of peak. And they were telling me, they were like, yeah, I got it because, my older cousin was playing it and I really wanted to play with him. So I got the game and I like made my character and I loaded in and I asked him like, okay, how do I find you? And their cousin was like, oh yeah, I'm in this other city. And they realized that it was like halfway across the map from them and they had to cross through some of the hardest zones in the game to like get there. And they said I was like, so wait, how did you get together with them? And they were like, well, 3 months later and I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What?
Wow.
That's 11, yeah. When I bought it and then I didn't play it for years because I couldn't figure out how to pay for it because I was like 13.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't use the account management system. What is this? By the time I finally got into the game, it was because a friend was dragging me along, and like they on my first day bought me an airship pass and was just like, "There, don't bother me."
Oh my god!
I remember playing it in, what was it, 2004, 2005 when it came out here, and I think I spent a month with the game, and I leveled warrior like an idiot. Which turned out to be a useless class, and I got to level 40, and I could not find a group, and I was like, I do not want to go another 40 levels on another class. I quit. I'm gonna go play something else.
This is a good sub job.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah,
Just
They
level
all
your sub
stopped
job
at
first.
37.
It's really funny. I still think that that Square should take a page from Daybreak Games, who ended up owning EverQuest 2, because at one point they allowed you to pay for a membership that included all of their games, including like Star Wars Galaxy and like EQ1, EQ2 as a package deal. And I think I would play Final Fantasy XI every once in a while, but I can't justify throwing 15 at it when I might not play it for 3
Same.
weeks. And so if they would let me package 14 with 11 for $20, I'd send them their money. For sure.
They did that for a very, very short time when 14 was first released, and I don't know why they ever stopped because I thought it was a great idea.
It is a
Yeah.
good idea.
I mean, especially because they were trying to get people from 11 to 14 initially, because it was just like natural ecosystem transfer.
Yeah, it's really baffling to me. I mean, even in like, okay, so like if we compare Guild Wars 1 to Guild Wars 2, right? Because that's kind of a similar relaunch,
Yeah.
They even did like a bridging expansion where like the final installment of Guild Wars 1, there were even like achievements and things that you could do and you can still go back and do that then would like give you special rewards or like veteran reward kind of things in Guild Wars 2 when you play it. So like even now you can go back and do that, and like the games themselves are so cheap. And I really do think that like if for no other reason than to just give your players some other options of content that they can spend their time on. I mean, bundling subscriptions together for 11 and 14 or like allowing some option where you could also have 11 just makes so much sense to me. And like, especially if they threw a little something in there even that would, even give you like titles in 14 if you progress through this story or this part of it or something like that. People would 110% do it. People would absolutely go back and play it. And I mean, I think that it would honestly be better all around because you then get an even bigger appreciation of the game, and they have those servers up. So like you might as well just have people go play it. Like as it is really hard to justify. Do I want to spend money on a subscription for 11 when I may not even have people I know who play it? Yes, I can play it alone now because they've made adjustments, but it's still one of those games where like if you don't have a million wiki tabs open and you don't know somebody who knows something about the game, it's like so arduous to try and figure out in a sense. So it's kind of like they, I don't know, almost just want to keep the population controlled over there or something.
Maybe that's it. That's the goal.
Yeah, because like I wanted to drag these fuckers through 11's story, but like to do that, I need to drag them completely across the world so I can power level them first.
See, what you did was you made me make an Elvon character, and it ended up being one of my OCs, so good job.
You're welcome.
Wow. See, I made a character, I got them to 50, and it's like, now you have to go find these things to get to break your level cap and get to 55. And I was like, I don't want to do that right now. And I
forgot about that.
To do that.
Oh yeah, the freaking Genkai quests or whatever.
And going around to pick up all your AF.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I forgot about all that.
I will say all of this is why I sort of like, I'll just ask Arden and Co about the lore and not worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I had all the time in the world, I'd love to go back and look at it. But my brief experience with 11 was like, it was okay, but it just didn't really click with me enough. And going back to it now would just be too much time. I've only really got time for like 14 as it is.
I tried to lore monger it. Like I tried to take my 14 approach and go back because like that's how I got into lore in the first place. Was I decided like it's such a shame that we lost so much of this story in 11. I'd like to make sure that doesn't happen again. So once I like knew and had a process for archiving lore in 14, I went back to 11 and I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I tried to like data mine the text. And it was all attached to the map instead of the quest. So it was just this file, like all 10,000 words or all 10,000 lines ever spoken in Northern Sandoria. And I was like, oh, screw this. I'm out of here.
Well, that's so bad.
One day.
God, that's terrible.
Like 50 levels and all I know is beast tribes are bad. Go kill them for their bits of armor.
We don't say that anymore.
There's a conspiracy. There's a conspiracy brewing. No, they're beasts. They're beasts.
I don't give a shit.
And they're always beasts. And goblins are assholes. And that's pretty much
goblins are super assholes in 11.
I actually love that they're kind of the same Gabi model, but from what you're saying, I can already say I'll like the 14 ones better because they're kind of cute.
The 14 ones are on our side. In 11, all they do is shank you in the kneecaps all day. Like that's all they do.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, there is one that's like on your side, if I remember right, and won the quest, and then it gets killed, and it's just like, oh well, I'm sad now.
Oh, stick flicks.
That reminds me of the Hobgoblins. On the first and also in earlier titles. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
I had a moment when I saw the Hobgoblins on the first. I was like, hey, it's the little guys from Final Fantasy IV, the first one to fight.
Guys, it's an imp.
I was so excited.
What's that one's name? It's something murdery. What is it?
Lil Murderer.
Lil Murderer. That's it.
Wait. Is their name actually Little Murderer?
Yes, it is actually that.
Lil. L-I-L.
Yeah, L-I-L.
Oh my god.
Yeah, L-I-L apostrophe murderer.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And when you're killing him, he's like, this is how I die.
That's hysterical.
They're actually called like that. I mean, there's in Goblin Enemy in the City of Omnia and the higher version of them, they're called like that, actually. So, yeah.
Incredible. It is really amazing seeing how Final Fantasy MMOs have evolved into 14, and even now, like looking ahead at this next kind of horizon, all the graphical updates, holy cow, all the things that they do need to, I think, if we are going to get another 10 years in this game, like things they need to continue working on. But it's been amazing to see how the different ideas, like they keep reimagining worlds in a sense, and yet still drawing from similar things, and somehow still making it so fun to have so many throwbacks and nods to various Final Fantasy titles and entirely new, unique ideas. 14, I think, has really taken that to a whole new level where it really does feel like they are so firmly stepping into their own in the stories they want to tell. Oh, I'm so glad this time around too that like our raids and our 24-man are all themed around 14's world specifically.
Yes.
Like, oh, it's just so good.
It was fun to have the tie-ins for a little bit, but I think with the ending of the game, it's important. Like the ending, I said the thing. Yoshida's gonna kill me. With the ending of the first main scenario.
Thank you.
There we go.
This is not the end of the game, Moose. Did you not know that?
We're not recording this for posterity. Go ahead.
Yes, we are.
So, yeah. Like with the ending of the first main scenario, I think it's important that we do have even the raids kind of tie into the world just to like kind of celebrate the originality of it. And as you're talking about it, you're getting me like all excited for 18 online, but I think I think Yoshida may have banned them from making one until they figure out how to wrap up 11.
Oh, that's funny.
So we may have a little bit.
You're not allowed.
That's my conspiracy theory, that they're not allowed to make a third MMO until they figure out how to close the first MMO, and that's why they're upgrading all of our graphics.
I thought the very, very end of 11 was going to be the Iroha event in 14, where it's like, you got to play 14 to find out how 11 ends. And then they kept making updates for 11, and they're adding a new storyline now, and I'm like, okay, so it's still going, I guess?
I thought it was going to be Rhapsodies, yeah.
Drop a meteor on it and then write it into 14. Done.
Yeah.
It's one of the shards that remains.
Are you implying they should rejoin the games?
Oh my.
Yes. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? This is the kind of thing I could see them actually pulling. They like, we get some new stuff in 11 or whatever, and then people start playing it, and then they realize that yes, it is canonically one of the shards, and then one of our next major story arcs, it's like, you go there, and 14 and 11 are finally coming together, and you should play both to understand. Like, I would lose it. And yet, I could see it.
Y'shtola finally opens the way to another shard. Just
honestly,
like walking to Sandoria.
She walks
be the thing to push me into playing.
Yeah, well, that would do it. Yeah, I would absolutely do it.
See, that's what everyone's thinking about 16 ever since they used that term icon.
Icon, Mother Crystal, Ether, they use it on the entire...
And then you look at the map too, and it looks like Norvrant. Yeah.
I mean, Magicite is in 6 and 12, but that doesn't mean they're connected.
I'll wait until we see they have something like that really tells us it's the same world, like Moogles or Chocobos.
I mean, it's literally the entire Heaven's Ward team. So I am my hero being the scenario writer. I'm expecting a lot of death, and I'm expecting to not get attached to a single character.
Yeah, I've heard him saying that he wants to do a dark, low fantasy with like really gritty themes and no guns for a while. So I think this is his bucket list, and I think he's gonna like really put his all into it. And I'm very, very excited for it.
Super excited.
Considering he did Heaven's Ward and he killed off 2 characters already. Yeah, it's gonna happen.
I think there's like something to be said for sometimes they just use the words and concepts that are familiar to them and they resonate with it and they want to use in a different way. Like I'm all for conspiracies about connections, but at the same time, like 15 was about the Graulian Empire.
Yeah.
So sometimes the curtains are just blue.
Yeah.
Graulian.
It's really the Graulian.
I couldn't think of a new word.
I'm gonna use that.
I mean, in fairness, like when it's not necessarily your native language, sometimes it'll come out sounding a little differently, or it looks very similar in English. It probably does not in Japanese. I don't know. Just guessing here.
Yeah.
Now I'm looking up Graulia
but it is
trying to remember.
Funny.
Graulia.
It was the capital of Niflheim, yeah.
Niflheim, huh?
Yep.
And they did the same thing with Evil East too, if I remember correctly, because Matsuno basically closed off the end of Tactics. Did he not?
Tactic the first? The first
Did
Tactics?
he say in an interview that he closed off the end of Tactics in 14, or he wrote
I believe that he did mention that. I mean, because there was always hope that there would be more with tactics, right? And I believe even that he tried to, didn't he try to do like a fundraiser or Kickstarter or something to try and do like another game? So it's, I mean, which is so weird to me. I'm like, I don't know why Final Fantasy doesn't just fund another tactics game. Like, there has to be something going on, because I mean, it is one of those games that maybe isn't quite as visible as like 7 or like the really big Final Fantasies, I guess, but at the same time, it has such a solid reputation amongst so much of the Final Fantasy player base that it's very funny to me that is something that he would even have to go do, like try to raise his own money to make another tactics game. I'm like, why?
We have 3 tactics game. I mean,
we do.
We have Tactics, we had Tactics Advance and Tactics Advance 2, and they're all 3 great.
Yeah, so I mean, it seemed like he had an opportunity to try and, I guess, give a sense of closure to certain things within 14.
I think that's a good way to put it. A sense of closure. Like, first, I'm going to say that like Yasumi Matsuno is the reason that I fell in love with Final Fantasy. Like, if it weren't for him, I would just be a guy who liked 10. And I wouldn't even call it 10. I'd call it Final Fantasy X, like ECKX. And if it like he's the one who really brought me into the franchise, so I feel like we should be treating him like Hideo Kojima. Like, you just give him as much money as he wants, and if it's hit, it's hit. If it's mitts, it's mitts. But he's always going to do something cool and interesting. You just keep giving him money. Like, that's how I believe he should be treated, because I love so much of what he's made. In terms of like the direct connections between the Evil East Alliance and 14, there's no direct ones. And he the way that he established that couldn't be the case was he inverted the timeline. Everything is backwards of the timeline that it should be in 14. So like his goal here was to take the Evil East Alliance and smash it into a million pieces and rebuild it as something new. And when he decided to do that, the idea that popped into his head was he wanted Ivalice in 14 to be like Garlemald's King Arthur. Like, it's part history, it's part mythology, it's almost a weird religion to some people. But to make sure that no one could ever claim they were the same world, he inverted the present day Ivalice timeline. It's backwards of what it is in 12 and Tactics.
Yeah, because 12 is a Tactics prequel, but here 12 is where the world of 12 with Rabanastre and Fran and all of them are way after Tactics.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is that Matsuno should be awarded an award by Jeff Keighley.
Also, yes.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's so funny. Matsuno's work has been so beloved and yet also so highly criticized. When you look at like Tactics versus 12, funnily enough, has long been one of my favorite Final Fantasies.
Thank you.
I love
Yes.
8. I love 8 and I love 12, and everybody's like, why?
Because 8 is the best PlayStation Final Fantasy.
I mean, there are different things about these games that will resonate with different people. And one thing I always say to everybody is like, it's kind of like Doctor Who. The great thing is that there are trademark things you're going to love, but depending on the writers, the season, the actors, aka characters, like, you're probably going to resonate more with something than another. So that's why I love this franchise. Like, if one's not for you, that's great. But for me, I always loved 12 because I think of a lot of the same reasons that you do, Moose. And I mean, all the inspiration sources that he draws from, and I think the way he writes, I've talked a lot about the like devices that he uses when he writes, be it like, you know, symbolism, alliteration, metaphor. He almost writes in a sense that feels very Shakespearean, or that like has almost theatrical, historical, poetic kind of. It's just so interesting. Like, he writes in this way that is so steeped almost in high fantasy, and I love the way that he envisions these. So I was really excited to see it come to 14, and to actually have that influence here in the game. It is hard because I think his vision is usually so distinctive and so not different, but it's something where like, I think it's tough when you have contradicting styles with it, but I think they made it work well in 14. I was a little bit bummed, actually, that he said that he wouldn't, at least as far as we know, be working on any future stuff, because I was excited that he would at least get a chance to mess around more in 14 in his own little sandbox corner of the game.
If we can get Gaius back, we can get Ivalice 3.
Yeah.
We just have to start the right campaign. And I'm with you. Like, there's something about the way that he subverts the Final Fantasy formula and gets away with it that's very endearing to me. And I imagine that, like, nightmare to produce and work and like build all this stuff. But I imagine that like it's got to be worth it in the end too. I spent years trying to convince people to play 12, and everybody was like, either I hate the battle system, even though Dragon Age used it to critical acclaim, or like,
that's rude. That is
or
rude.
it drags ass in the middle, which it does if you let yourself get distracted by the side quest. It really does. But like, it's my favorite game, and to see it get the respect it deserves through the Zodiac Age is like really, really, really vindicating.
Waiting for that to happen to the 13th trilogy.
That cough again.
So I gotta say, I picked up Zodiac Age. I haven't played it yet, but it's on my list. But I played 12 when it came out, and my biggest issue with 12 was the hunt system was too good. And it led to me
so distracted.
I was so focused on the hunt system. I don't remember anything that happened in the story because I was like, I need to get ready for the next hunt.
Oh my goodness.
I find that a lot of people, it happens right around the Sky City, where like they get to the point in the Sky City, they go in with Larza, they come out, they do 500 hunts, and they're like, wait, what was the plot?
So basically in 12, it's you guys felt like I'm here to kill chaos, but instead of chaos, insert whatever monster was it, and then
whatever
kill Ultima.
Whatever's drawn on this sheet of paper, I'm gonna go out and kill.
Real
pretty
quick,
much.
It's on topic actually. If anybody has Steam, right now they're having a JRPG sale, and Zodiac Age is $25, 50% off. So
I would honestly I would suggest getting it. Like for anybody who maybe hasn't played the game or you tried to play it a long time ago, like not even everybody here, but anybody who listens at any point, because the Zodiac Age actually I really do think makes it playable in a sense for people that might have found parts of it confusing or frustrating. Because I do remember that I think 12 was the very first Final Fantasy that I ever bought with my own money. Like as a kid, like I saved for it. I bought it with my own money. And I remember at that point in time playing it and being introduced to the concept of grinding in a way that I had never had to experience in my entire existence. Like there was some boss that like when you would go into it, you literally like would not be able to do anything else once you had gone into the fight. And the first time I tried to play 12, I went into it. I was underleveled and had no idea that I was underleveled. And I literally had to just like, I think I had to go back like hours and hours and hours in playtime because I had to go to like whatever save I had because there was no way to leave the arena to like go level up more.
Yep.
So I had to
Demon Wall.
It might have been. And so it's like Zodiac Age, they put in some really great features. Like all the remastered stuff I think is so well done. And like even just being able to, because it really is almost like computer programming, the way that you use gambits, like you create logic patterns, you create these like logic patterns to set up for your characters. And even in 14, I think we've seen them kind of experiment in a sense. Like I can only imagine that a lot of the like logic for things like trust or like we saw with the old Grand Company squadrons, like there is a sense that like what you could do in 12 that you yourself can like dictate is a lot of what you experience for like NPC programming behind the scenes that you might not even see like visibly, right? These like if, ands, and buts of behavior so that you have to think ahead in how you use these characters and then structure it. And then you can like literally use this like speed up function now. So you can just like go send your babies out into the field, be like, okay, I told you all what to do. And then you can fast forward, eat some popcorn. They'll run around the zone. They do their thing. Like, I think it makes it a lot more accessible for people that maybe just couldn't like figure it out or like get into it initially. So it's definitely worth grabbing.
The scripting them, I think, was like my biggest love and hate of that game because it was so fun to be able to optimize your NPCs to behave perfectly for the fight. And also, I'm really not good at proofreading. So I remember like setting up for the Demon Wall fight, and I was like, okay, here's my plan. I'm going to have them all cast Reflect on each other, and then I'm going to have them cast Black Magic on each other, so they all like nuke each other, but it gets reflected onto the boss, and that should kill it really quick. And then I didn't realize that I hadn't put like condition in battle, condition has reflect on.
Oh no.
So I left the Gambit menu and like just went back to the world map, and they immediately all nuked each other to death and it gave me a game over screen.
Rip.
That's heartbreaking, but it's so funny.
But
to
be honest, they've been using the gambit. I mean, in 12, you manually adjust the gambits, but they've been using the gambits ever since 12, because 13 has each character. You only control the leader, the other party members depending on their role and which character they are, because they're programmed. Their AI is programmed to behave according to the character's personality. So it's kind of for the most part they won't mess around with your battle system, but in some instances some characters are better than others, because depending on which character is in your party, then they will behave accordingly. And in 14 we have the trust system, and in 15, which I haven't played but I more or less know how it goes, also the party members do behave according to the situation. And so they've been using that for ever since 12, actually. Right now I think in Strangers of Paradise it's the same. You control the main character, and the other characters behave depending on the situation. So and as far as we know, 16 is going to be single character, but we don't know yet. So, but surely if it's going to have more than one party member, it's going to be the Gambit system, but just that you don't control anymore, that you don't program anymore. It comes programmed, so to speak. But I think that's fine. I mean, it's the natural evolution of video games.
You just reminded me, like back in the day when Yoshida would talk about his hopes and dreams instead of his actual like plans that were on the roadmap. He kept talking about that we were going to have a second companion to the Chocobo, and it was going to be a Magitech companion that you could program through gambits.
Oh,
where
I honestly would love
Yoshida!
That.
That would be awesome.
I mean, like, that would be
turned out to be
amazing.
too difficult.
I guess, but it still does feel like, I mean, we're seeing some other MMOs start to really push that. I mean, the closest that I can think of would be ESO, which just recently introduced these like new companion characters. And 11 has its own kind of system like this too, right? But I think ESO has taken it into like sort of a modern age where you have these companion characters, you can level them up, you can choose what skills they use, you can like slot them in, you can give them weapons, armor. They have their own little like plots and storylines that you can play through, and like relationship meters. It's actually fun, like even as you go around the world, if you do different things or respond in certain ways, or like one of them's like a big book nerd. So if you're the kind of person who, like me, stops to read every book on every shelf in every dungeon, even while being swarmed by monsters, you get like approval when you do that.
Sounds like my kind of character.
I mean, that's just it. You know what I mean? I think we all have that vibe here with it being lore related.
Basically like Skyrim, that you can have your companion in the field.
Yeah, and I think even, funnily enough, I think even a little bit more fleshed out in the sense that they give you more agency over them and variety with them. So like seeing something like that in 14, I mean, it has been interesting because I've been wondering so much about how they're going to unify all these disparate systems. We've got like Chocobo companion, we've got squadrons that still exist, we've got trust characters, we have like, I kept thinking at some point maybe they would try to like tie them together in one thing and like overhaul squadrons to function as some kind of like our lower level trusts. But now it sounds like they're doing something different where you will have like grand company trusts in the lower levels, but they won't be squadron mates, but they will be. I don't know. It feels like it would be a nice step to have something like an open world companion, either extending out what the Chocobo can do, or like allow it, or giving you that secondary, somebody that you could program in a sense to some degree, or like have function in a way that you want.
You just gave me the thought of an all Chocobo companions in dungeons, and I'm like, actually, yes.
Chocobo
dungeon. Not what you were going for, but that's what popped in my head.
I mean, it'd be great.
Imagine being able to adventure with any of the Scions or other characters that you like, but at any time that you wanted to.
Imagine being a member of the Mentor Network and actually getting being a mentor to an NPC.
That would be interesting.
So, going back to the 12 and tactics talk, Moose and Rook, do you believe that we will get another Evilise part wrap up? Because after what happened in Bosnia, at the very end, it's clear that the whole Gabranth on the Gabranth note, it seems way too fishy. It seems way too unclear, we'll say, on whether it was an actual death, and also Fran's dialogue on maybe we'll meet again in Dalmasca, and the scene with obviously the other Allegan artifacts. It just seems way too open to, I hate using this word because he used it in the live letter and that kind of made us mad, open to interpretation about whether or not we'll go back and revisit Evilise in the future. What do you guys think about that?
Do you want to go first or second?
Go be free, Moose.
Go be free. Okay. I was convinced that there was going to be a third part and shocked to hear that there wasn't one planned, that there had actually, it sounded like he was saying they decided not to for now. And I would like to start to peer pressure them to go through whatever suffering is required to get through one more.
And the thing about, there was another thing too, like the tweet that everyone was saying, oh, this confirms that he will never be working on another. It's a thing with Google Translate that it does not translate all that well. You would need to be you would need to have a Japanese proficiency to understand that he was talking about this game. I'll see you in another game. Like he was talking about Shadowbringers. This was one whole game. So you could take from that he will see you in another game.
Mm-hmm. It's tough. I mean, I agree with Moose. I would like to see it. I mean, I just, even just from the perspective of, right, we have these two playable races, Viera and Hrothgar. And obviously they've been trying to kind of add them more into the world here or there. We saw in Sharlayan, we saw in Thavnair, we've seen like more places where they're trying to make it feel like they are a coherent part of the world, even though obviously, much like, you know, the Aura and things like that, it's so funny to me that the races get implemented a lot of times, and then like down the road, they've been like, oh, we need to probably give more context about who they are and their people and the areas that they're from. So even though we did kind of get a glimpse with Viera on the first, it still doesn't feel to me like we really truly, I don't know, like especially once we get the other genders fully finished, like it really does feel to me as though having another section where we get to like actually see more about that part of the map, that world, what role they'll play in the future in this alliance. I have a siren going by, so you're going to hear it wail in the distance. Like all of that to me, they're coming. All of that to me, especially from like a role-playing standpoint, is something that I very much want to see. Will they do it? I don't know. I mean, I really hope, but from what I've heard, it seemed like some of the international markets weren't as keen on that content as some of us here were. It seems like maybe there's just been a lot of discussion about it. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Maybe like rough spots and all. Like there definitely critiquable things about how they handled some of that open world content and some of the storytelling and some of the vagueness of the ending and stuff like that. But I mean, there's so much good there.
I don't remember whether there was the Western or Eastern audience that didn't like Bosnia.
I had this feeling that it was Japan specifically, but I'm not.
Yeah, I loved it. Like when I read all the field notes, I was convinced that I understood the setup for the third story, and I just don't understand where I'm at now. Like, I feel now like they wrote that as vague as they could and kind of gave possibilities in multiple directions so they'd have a lot to play with if they ever came back to it. But I was so sure for weeks that like the 6-month gap they referenced was supposed to be like a meta joke for the time that we spent doing Endwalker, and that we'd come back to Ivalice after we'd saved the world. I thought for sure Gabranth and Leon or however you want to pronounce it were conspiring to kind of cut their losses with the Empire and reforge their own nation, and that we were going to go and focus on seeing like Ash rise in Dalmasca, and they were going to lay siege to Leomond, and then Gabranth was going to attack them while they were fighting, and the Warrior Light and the Bosians would have to come, and it'd be just like this huge, massive battle where we finally take out Gabranth and restore Dalmasca to one kingdom, and I was like so ready for it. And then they were just like, yeah, no, see you later.
Heartbreaking.
I have a strong suspicion that now that we've saved the planet from doom, reigniting the various kingdoms and nations under a healthy rule is going to be really important for our adventuring journey coming forward, like 6.1 and beyond. I have no way of predicting whether it'll actually occur, but I would love to see some more like meaty geopolitical stuff with like the actual nations of the world. I mean, there's no reason we can't actually go to Landis and restore the Republic, even. I mean, except that those
what I was
lore
thinking
entries
too,
at the
actually.
end are like, all right, he's dead, nothing's happening, and then Matsuno's statement came out, and I'm like, what do we do, guys? I mean, I challenge anyone to imagine the last 8 months of Shadowbringers without Bosnia content. I mean, what is there? So it was really, I really personally loved it. I've always been a fan of that stuff, and even though I liked the ambience of Eureka better as content, I mean, they just did a much better mechanical job with the battle system in the dungeons and spacing the raids out and having an extra tier difficulty version. It's just really cool, and if they don't iterate on it, I'd be surprised. So that's my opinion.
But where will our next iteration be?
I mean,
or when?
In terms of lore, I would like, if I may make a note, because I think Fao referenced Landis, and Landis is a quite a complicated place in lore, because Fao said restore Landis, but then you go back in lore, and then Landis actually willingly joined the Gallian Empire. So it's like one of these questions of, will Landis want actually to become Landis again, or you know, one of those questions in which are actually geopolitical.
So now we have the question of whether or not we have to free Leomond.
I think, like, with what we've just seen, I wonder what, like, we're going to be fighting, if anything, in the Empire. Like, maybe the Empire would willingly leave, considering all of the factions that just surrendered in All Amigo. Like, it could be a reorganization of the Empire, a rebuilding of the Empire. There could be a diplomatic approach to pulling the Empire out of Dalmasca and restoring that kingdom. Like, it doesn't have to be battle anymore, which is pretty cool. But then, like, what would we fight? Or would this be our opportunity to realign that and have maybe the Garleans at Leomond fighting with Ash against whatever the hell Gabranth is doing? Like, there are so many possibilities to align that fight.
But we know that the basically the occupying forces in the Dalmascan region were basically already split off from the Empire.
Already cut off, yeah.
Own nation. So even though Garlemald fell, I don't think it would really affect them politically.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting blending of cultures and people there too, as we saw examined with Boja, right? Because they have kind of fragmented off and then redefined what they almost do or don't want to take from that, and then tried to like push forward and evolve that particular force. I mean, yeah, whether or not they decided to hurt or help would be really interesting, especially with this supposed death that has happened of Gabranth and, you know, some of the motivating forces. But I do think they have a lot to work with in this world. You know, how they would want to do that. I think the rebellion with Fran, that to me got me so excited, because I was just like, I would love to see, you know, if they were able to bring these characters in a sense, but also get to go to these locations and see like a restoration of the throne, or even just like a new government large scale, because we know there's kind of a start for that as they've been figuring out how they might want to organize things in various parts of those regions. I personally think there's more than enough for them to work with, and I think that they learned a lot from Eureka into Boja into, like, they've been iterating so much. The longevity of some of that content is something like from a more mechanical standpoint, right? Where it's like, how do we, I think, continue to give this a place within the game itself, and making sure that they're like, you know, if we're going to be doing other things, we don't know yet, like exactly what we're going to be doing for all of our relic stuff, or, you know, other things beyond that. But it's one of those sort of questions where it's like, well, they could decide to do this or not. They could put this in as some other totally unrelated content or not. They could totally shake this up and make it like, I don't know, something we don't even know yet, because we have these bonus dungeons that are coming next that have the high-end difficulty dungeons that are coming in a set. We have all this other content. So I don't know when we'll see this, but I would love to see them revisit it, because there are a lot of places still to see on Heidelin that I do also think need their moment to shine. But there definitely are a lot of big like question marks in this area, in the sense that we have seen it a whole bunch in like side content, but we haven't really actually, you know, gotten fully fleshed map zones and storylines, and like in the more traditional sense in the game. So again, it's like the only way they flesh it out is either by maybe actually tying it into one of these adventure stories that we might be getting, or continuing to build it out in this, you know, end game content. So I really hope they do go back to it. There's still a lot to do there.
And like, it's just referring to Dalmasca Inferior, the only place that we really went there and explored was Orban Monastery, and that was a raid. and in the later on in the Bosnia storyline, the only other reference we had to it was Castrum Valnini, which was recently destroyed by Lion Rim Halsos. That was the castrum at Valnain. It was a port city on the eastern coast of Dalmasca Inferior. So Lion destroyed the castrum, but he did not destroy Leamond, so it just has me questioning whether or not Leamond is still standing or under occupation, because that's the capital of Dalmasca, under Garlean occupation right now, if it is.
In before the new deep dungeon is just Vagrant Story.
They did set some of that up. Like, they merged a couple other things into that storyline, and there's so much potential for it. And like, I don't know how many other people are excited for it, because I'm vanilla as fuck, and I don't even like. I don't want to see more timelines. I don't want to see more shards. I don't want to see more planets. I'm done. I have peaked. I want to see the rest of the planet. I want to see the rest of the planet, and I feel like if I were in charge of this game, people would be bored out of their gourd in the next like 6 months. So.
But Moose, we'd be happy.
Yeah, we'd be happy.
Give yourself some credit. I think that even if you were vanilla, you'd still flesh it out in a way that would be very satisfying and immersive and more intense.
Yeah, vanilla, not low quality.
Vanilla's a flavor, guys. Like,
yeah, vanilla is delicious.
Vanilla
you know what?
There's a reason it's popular.
And I imagine that people like me and Neela and Arden would find ways to put chocolate syrup all over that vanilla.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to speak.
Something bring about the rule of his darkness.
Exactly.
I mean, it is amazing because I think this is what 14 does so well. I am don't get me wrong, I'm a sucker for the big epic fantasy moments. I do love it. I do love the ancients. I am obsessed with all of that. I think it's so fascinating and fun and wild, and I love when you push fantasy to like the boundaries of imagination and the scale you can do it and how you can use it as this vehicle for greater messages and all kinds of stuff. Like, I love it. But I think 14 also does an incredible job of just its world building, right? Like the zones, the places, the groups, the factions, the people. And sometimes when you are dealing with these like huge epic narratives, it's this real tight walk of like, okay, well, how much just sort of general ambiance and world building do we allow, and how much needs to be focused on the epic hero fantasy narrative? And so to have this kind of adventuring mindset where like, I mean, we don't know yet, but we'll see soon where they're sort of going to be taking this. But to like actually get to go and like see more regions and explore them just for the purposes of exploring them and like get to know the people. Like, I honestly think that to me, that is some of the most just interesting. I love it. Like, I love the big fantasy moments, but I really do find my in-game life enriched by like having these zones. I mean, even just running around Radzat Han and Sharlayan, like that was a big highlight for me in Endwalker. Like I genuinely loved that. And I loved doing the little side quest and I loved learning more about the area and seeing the architecture and the people. So, I mean, there is something to be said about the power of just that as well. And if that is more vanilla in a sense, I mean, it's just because like you were saying, Moose, they deliver some high quality vanilla up in here and you got to have that foundational flavor for everything else.
I love that so much.
So, Moose, I gotta ask you, how about that vanilla content in terms of time travel?
Oh God!
We opening up the can of worms,
the transition, eh?
Yeah.
I am, in a weird way, I'm like, stop like talking about it now. Like, just never bring it up again, and we'll be okay. Because like, I hate time travel so much.
You, me, and Cobb.
It makes worlds. It makes worlds smaller. It makes worlds cheaper. It's very difficult to like pay the tax on them. Like there's just like a very, very high tax to using time travel. And I thought like at first Alexander was so impressive in the way that it did it well. And then Shadowbringers came along and broke all of Alexander's rules. And I was like, wait, what? And then I finally just accepted like, you know what? It's not an infinite multiverse. What's really going on is that the rift is an unmanifest potentiality of the infinite multiverse, and we have used the rift to create. You know, like I finally like made an excuse for it, and I got comfortable with it again. And then we moved on to even more time fuckery in Endwalker, but at the cost of them saying, actually, it's a bootstrap paradox inside of time fuckery, inside of another bootstrap paradox, which is only connected to one side of the. And I was like, no, just, you know what? Leave it alone right now. Like, never touch it again. Because now we have the perfect excuse, which is a combination of bootstrap paradoxes and rift shenanigans that are threads of time woven into one thread by like one long strand, we'll call it a fabric, sure, one cloth by Vana, and that all of the strands of it that weren't important have been cut away, and that this is the conjunction, and that it's just like this one deliberate thing. And I'm like, don't touch it, don't ever mention it again, you can only ruin it, leave it alone, don't touch it.
And then they did during the live letter.
Cobb had to record a full video on me ranting about time travel, so
Wait,
which
in
a few days.
No, you mean not record, put together, it's different.
Which part did they do in the live letter?
Where they addressed basically, oh yeah, it's up to you.
It's open to interpretation, and I hate that line.
Part of that I'm okay with, because there are certain, like when they say something's up to your interpretation, it's still within the confines of the stuff that's confirmed in the game. And it looks like, so far, fingers crossed, I'm jinxing it, everything's going to be horrible. Pandemonium is expanding the bootstrap paradox.
It is.
To like after Endwalker is complete, all the way to Elpis, if not before our trip to Elpis, because of the ambiguity there. So we might be enclosing the entire game in a bootstrap paradox where it's confirmed by an NPC that the reason you went back and did those raids is because you already had, and you always had, and you had to live it from a first-person perspective in order to make it be true, or the whole thing falls apart. So you have no choice but to do it. And if that comes true, we've done it. We never have to touch time travel again. They can just leave it alone. And I'm really hoping that's what happens, because like, again, it's so hard to use time travel and pay the tax. It's such an expensive tax.
I don't like it in the games that I've played, and I don't like it in MMOs where it gets even more confusing.
Stares at Final Fantasy 11.
I like stories that are about time travel, and time travel is the core element, and it's woven through, and it makes sense because that's what the story is about. Adding it as into other stories, I tend to get very critical of. I will say
that's a really good point.
I'm critical of it.
That's a really good point. When they introduce time travel as the core mechanic of the story, it becomes what I like to call a conceit. And like every story asks you to accept certain conceits. And when one of them from the get-go is, look, just accept time travel, it's a lot easier because, again, that's the basis of the story.
Yeah.
10-2.
It's a good way to put it.
I actually really like 10-2. Wait, 13-2. Yeah, I actually really liked 13-2 because of its time travel.
Yeah, it's difficult. Time travel, I think, really does force you to, in a sense, either suspend your disbelief just indefinitely, or to get so meticulous about scientific thought that you feel as though you can create some sort of rationale, or like, you know, dismiss the structures that are being set up because they are in and of themselves a bunch of nonsense because the writer just assumed you would suspend disbelief. So it like constantly creates this weird dilemma. I think the big thing for me that I enjoy about time travel is when it is used to allow you to peer into different moments, periods, histories in a way that allows you as someone to like have an actual emotional connection to those time periods as opposed to just intellectual, you know? To me, that's the biggest thing because I am real life like a big history nerd. If I had the ability to actually go back and like live a day in different time periods, I 100% would love to, just because no matter how much we intellectually theorize, research, piece together, you know, try and, you know, through archaeology and other means, know what it meant to live in different periods. There are so many things that we will continue to get wrong, you know, and we have no way to actually go experience them. So it's something for me where I enjoy, in a sense, if it's allowed as a device to give us a direct personal connection to some place, something, some period. I like, I guess, in a sense, feeling the weight of existence on a planet, in a place, in a thing, like what it has meant to be alive in many different time periods there. But it does have to always be trod carefully, and I mean, there are a lot of times that I think it's almost used as like a, ha ha ha, this will blow your mind, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess, but none of that made any sense. So did it really blow my mind? I'm not sure. I am definitely confused now, but I don't know if it goes beyond that. You have to be careful with it.
That reference to scientific thinking, I think, just like got me, like I'm now caught on it. It's now rotating, like just repeating in my head. Because I understand that we're in flying space clock JRPG right now, but they made Dynamis into dark matter. So no, I'm not leaving time travel up to Disney logic. I'm not doing it. Make it work, Ishikawa.
So
made Elidibus interesting. You made me give Xenos his rematch and not hate it. Like, you could do this.
Oh, I don't know about the Xenos part.
Oh yeah,
that, you know, and I don't know. But yeah, no, I agree otherwise.
So I got to interject here because it wasn't actually dark matter; it was dark energy.
You're right.
Dark matter is actually still an unknown because we have Aether, which is baryonic matter, and Dynamis, which is dark energy, and now we still have, which means now in game we still have this other 27% that we still know nothing about. That is basically the opposite of Dynamis.
What's funny is that while Rook was talking, I took like a little note about what I wanted to say, and it says dark energy on the note, and my mouth just decided it was going to do its own thing. Does that a lot.
It happens.
So you all, this is actually reminded me a lot of a conversation I had with Cobra a little while ago about our Azem being like an outside of time god who just knows what's happening through the pandemonium dialogue.
Would you call that a fate thing?
This is basically he's
Their
Doctor
ties
Who
to fate
or
weird
she,
me out.
you know, whichever. They're Doctor Who, and per Arden's comment in the chat, like
what? Sorry, someone address me?
No.
I hate this theory that it's like at the very, very end of 14 we go back and become the original Azem.
Yeah, there it is.
And that's how, Elidibus knows, to meet us and help us and all of that stuff, and why Azem's not there, but knows we're going to be there. And I really hate it, and I really hope that's not what they're doing.
How Elidibus says, oh no, he's not here because he knew you'd be here. So
I'm gonna play the other side of this, and that I think I might love that.
Right.
It would be very funny.
Now
very,
look,
like, campy.
Yes, it would be campy, and it would be kind of nonsense, and I fully agree with that. And I think that anybody that hated it would be fully right to hate it. And yet, a little part of me kind of loves it because I
can touch them with my own fingers.
Dude, Moose, don't call me out like this. but I mean, yeah. Yes, because I don't know, it's there is something very pointedly bittersweet, right, about the fact that, like, you're all ships passing in the night, in a sense, you've all met at some point and then forgotten, or like the vehicles that we saw in Endwalker with the like, and then Hermes decided to wipe everybody's minds. But don't worry, at the end of time, after their souls got cleansed or whatever, at the end of the universe, they remember you for a second and then they peace out. And it's like, okay, I feel bad about this because I do wish that I could have actually had time to like relate to them and speak to them and to like live a life conscious of the people that I had like a place or role or had impacted, in a sense that, like, I mean, of course there are narrative beats to support either way, but like from a personal self-satisfaction point, I kind of weirdly love the idea of, I mean, almost not having agency because of the way that the story has been envisioned, right? Like the nature of the way they've developed it over these years. There's a lot of stuff that they retroactively, like, they throw in and then they have to retroactively kind of go like, oh yeah, but you knew each other. Yeah. Well, we introduced this new villain and now we're going to flesh out exactly what he means. But sometimes it does feel like, in the scheme of an MMO and with just the nature of how it's written, that you don't feel like you always get to have the full like spectrum or scope of that experience. So like, to me, kind of the idea of like actually, in a way, almost in a sense, handing agency back to you at the end and saying like, you can decide how you want to interpret the ways that you would have lived through this and what that would mean if it was a burden or a gift for like your character. I actually kind of like it, but that's just me. And yes, Moose, then I could touch them with my own hands and knowledge that I was the one that was doing it. So
yeah.
You poke and prod the woman, but get no sign.
Oh, there'll definitely be a lot of poking and prodding going on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And it will be worthwhile.
I'd like the idea more if I'd have had the opportunity to like prepare for it in terms of like the lore. But now that I'm invested in the idea of there being another person, I wouldn't want that myself. But I can respect people who would. So I don't hate the idea.
Did you catch on to the idea after the first thing that we killed in the zone was a butterfly?
The butterfly effect.
The butterfly. Yeah.
So I'm gonna briefly segue based on this topic though. How many of you would actually want to meet Convocation Azem?
Yes, please.
If I could do like, if they lets you like do a little tweaking or makes it clear like you don't, it's not just literally your character but taller, I would be all about it. Yeah, I'd still be okay with that too.
Like, they're not gonna probably ever do this, but an Azem character creator would be pretty awesome.
Please.
So you can just make it and make sure that it fits what you want.
I mean, I don't really have a problem with them giving us a canon Azem, just because fan artists and fanfic writers are just going to throw out any lore or characterization they don't like anyway. And there's plenty of people who just want a canon answer, and I don't see a problem in giving them that.
I have to say, Tenebrae Queen says if it doesn't erase us from existence, then sure. Good call, because if it does, that'd be kind of awkward.
I mean, I could still get on board with that too, depending on how it was done.
Okay, fair.
I'm running through all the possibilities in my head. Like the idea that, like, what is the idea that we go back and become Azem? Does that require us to like become our ancient self and then go back and pose as the Azem that was there, who then gets sundered in the sundering? Is that what they're saying?
No, that means that the Spider-Man meme comes into effect.
Oh, okay.
You were always you that you were being, that you were going to be, that you are.
The idea.
I mean,
that
mechanically
he knows,
speaking,
or
if
she
we were
knows.
to actually be the same Asm, like say we go back in time and become that Asm, I would assume it would just mechanically work similarly to how Crystal Xart Graha merged with modern our timeline Graha.
I would suspect, since like in terms of how I understand the game, if old Azem is still whole, like all of the pre-sundering parts in one, and we are our own self, and we mutually have no desire to merge, that we might just be different people. Like it might not, the universe might not recognize that. Like in order to get Graha back together, we had to like use blood, which is in this game the catalyst between spiritual and physical, to even get them that far. So I think we might be okay if we met Azem, but I also think that there is that danger of subverting people's desires, so that they would have to be very coy about it. I think my personal best case scenario is that we do meet Azem just to close off the possibility of people saying that we're exactly the same. I'd love some kind of confirmation that Azem was his own person or her own person, and we're our own person, and that they're not synonymous perfectly, even if we have a lot in common, that there was this other person out there who we respect as having their own life, their own goals, and we learn a little about that. But I think it would also be very funny if they didn't show us what Azem looked like. If we only saw Azem as like some ambiguous person with the robe and the hood up and the mask on, and we don't learn it's them until the very end. And when we're like, wait a minute, are you Azem? And they just turn around and they do that like little finger up to their lips shh thing that we do and walk away. Yeah, I would love that idea.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
I would die.
Yeah, it'd be fun. It's so tough. I can understand why they would never show them, right? Like, it's difficult because I think I would be fine with it, but there is always the chance that, I mean, it is incredibly dissonant for people, or that the way that they would want to depict them would not be at all what people feel for that character. And I think it is so important in MMOs in particular that even if like the story is linear, there is a sense of agency within the world, because for so many people, that avatar, that connection, it has a level of self-expression and investment in MMOs that you don't see always elsewhere. I mean, like, of course, there are many RPGs that let you do that, but sometimes you are just playing scripted characters, and like particularly within Final Fantasy, right? This is one of the few where we have like a lot of full self-expression in how you want to create, customize, and make this character. I've been saying for a while that like if they wanted to do an expansion or something that was like filling in the blanks, and that whole expansion was set in the world of the ancients, and it like was, the final days and what Azem was doing, or some period of time, or whatever it was. And at the start, you could like customize an appearance of what Azem looked like, and when you were in those zones, you would look like that or something. Again, that would be revolutionary, and we wouldn't have seen it in an MMO before, but like something like that would be buck wild, that I think would just make like, it would make a lot of buzz, for everyone, and like what that meant. And it would also then allow you to choose and play as that character, even down to what dialogue you were picking and things like that. But outside of that, I do actually kind of like how they handle it. I like that we are almost hearing about ourselves tangentially from other people, so that there's still room to like go, oh, okay, well, like, how am I going to read into the relationship that they have with this character? Do I think they're being truthful in their perception of who I am? Do I think like, and so in that sense, I think they've played it really smart. I would love to see Azem, or at least like really get to choose for ourselves, even in like a flashback or something, or like us choosing dialogue where we feasibly have had some kind of vision and people are asking us about it, and then we get to determine like, yeah, when I was Azem, this, or I saw that, or like something like that would be so cool to me, because I do think that they've danced around the Azem thing in a sense that like we all just want to know. We just want that satisfaction. I would love to see it, but I don't know how they could implement it in a really satisfying way.
I don't know.
I think that's well said, honestly.
Yeah, my hope for that kind of fell apart when they did that Q&A in the live letter. Just like being like, yeah, we're just going to leave that alone and let you do what you want with that. And I mean, like, I'm always seeing people doing, like, on Twitter, like, these threads of, oh, share your wool, and then like a lot of the times I'm also starting to see, well, share your Zem, like, and then people's just like their wallets full of pictures of their wools now also increasingly have pictures of the Zems that they've been making with like modified Elizons or even just hires or whatever, like whatever models they can get a hold of. And then just like being like, yeah, this is my Zem, and then they're like, they go into the same kind of like, I love this character so much, I'm invested in them, like they are with their wool. And I feel like if they were going to do like any kind of thing where they showed us a Zem, they'd have to give us a character creator, and they kind of were. Yoshida gave me the impression that they weren't going to do that. They were just going to leave it up to our interpretation, and so I kind of like lost any sense that was ever going to happen, and I'm fine with that. Ultimately, that's because, like what Rook said, it would be very difficult to implement, and I can respect that. They have other things they want to do and prioritize right now.
The irony here, I think, is that what you're describing is also true for the timeline. Everyone has their own preferred how long this game has taken, how long they've spent on things, how long it's been since A Realm Reborn. And yet, in spite of that disparity, I think a lot of people are still like, pop the time bubble. So, like, I think there's always an opportunity for things to go either way because of apparently, like, people can come back a lot faster than I thought they could to accepting certain things. Like, if you had told me in Shadowbringers that in Endwalker it would actually be relatively easy to get everyone to accept, like, Emmett Selk just being like, I was a megalomaniacal madman with a stupid plan. Like, I would have never believed in a million years that people could adapt to that as fast as they did.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised by it too, but it's the most natural thing in the world now.
It is something to note on that. I mean, the characterizations of Emmett Selk Solus and Emmett Selk Ancient are so different. And it's not just a memory missing or 12,000 years. There's something like fundamental there in the acting and the disposition. They just seem
and
like
he's recognizably the same person. He's recognizably the same person, but so much growth and not all growth is comfortable or good or pleasant.
I just found it really interesting to see the juxtaposition.
I could tell it was the same person, but you could also tell very much, like, because I've studied his character so much, that like there was a lot of that theatrical flair, there was a lot of that pain missing, and he was a lot more conservatively minded, a lot more certain of himself than we saw, I think, in Shadowbringers.
He hadn't gone full Jack Sparrow yet.
Mm-hmm.
He still doesn't have his jar of dirt.
I'm trying to remember what interview it was, but like everybody was comparing Emmett Selk to Arden when he first came out, and even I called him Arden the Ascian. And I need to go back and try to find it, but I think there was an interview where they were like, oh, it's so surprising everyone's trying to compare him to Arden and think he's a ripoff of Arden, because we were trying really hard not to let it show that he was a ripoff of Jack Sparrow.
I remember that interview, yeah.
I do remember that too.
Yeah, I remember that. It's funny they said that, though, because eventually he just reminded me of Q from Star Trek, just down to the snap.
Yeah, and how he just joins you without your consent, like, just, and does his own thing, snaps his fingers, and things happen.
I mean, it's interesting for me with Emmett Selk because, I mean, there's so much we could do a whole episode just about breaking down these various characters, or even just about Emmett independently. I mean, there's all this discussion about the fact that, like, you know, how very dare you like a character that has committed terrible, egregious, you know, crimes, and how can you read into this, or, like, you know, just because they showed us past him, you know, how can you now justify or try to create rationale for this character?
let's be honest. The only ancient who hasn't committed heinous crimes is Hythlodaeus.
I mean, you could even argue that possibly Hythlodaeus, I mean, because he was the head of, creation, he may have had a hand in creating Zodiark or the structures or approving that. He chose to sacrifice himself to it. There was a lot of sacrifice that was done in the name of Zodiark. I mean, you can make all kinds of arguments on any of these characters, right? So I think, of course, there's always this discussion about character development, and especially when we're looking at the Ascians, the amount of lifetimes that they've lived, it's baffling to us. I mean, think about how drastically somebody can change from being a child to being an adult in our lifetimes. Think about how the most innocent people can become some of the worst villains or figures, in a single lifetime. Let alone when you have these complex beings that are fighting for this world and this image of perfection and these people that they once loved and lost. There's so much in there that, of course, these two entities are going to be wildly different because of what they've experienced. Young Emmett Selk versus the Emmett Selk that we know. And then there's also this whole component with the Emmett Selk that we know that is almost a farce, right? He makes all these theatrical illusions, which we also see with Fandaniel, which continues to rub me the wrong way because I love a good theater reference, but I was like, you are just doing what Emmett Selk did. Stop. I mean, technically, Fandaniel, if we're going to go back to all the other stuff with him being Ammon, yes, those themes are there. But one of the things that I've always found really interesting about Emmett Selk is the way that they specifically characterize him with Shakespeare. So even in some of his short stories, he does a reiteration of the final soliloquy from The Tempest, Shakespeare's The Tempest. When we see him initially, right, he's so theatrical, even the taking his bow, walking away from the stage, acknowledging the audience, he has all these different things. And so for me, the later versions of Emmett Selk that we see much more embody almost the line from As You Like It with all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. And one man in his time plays many parts. So it's he has played many roles throughout the ages. And the way that those roles have or haven't affected him, we don't always know. Because we don't know exactly what he's playing or not. So I don't think it's until the very end that we get a sense, or in those little moments in Shadowbringers or Endwalker, that we get a sense from him how he may have felt about the roles that he's played and what he really thinks about what he's done. Because to him, the world that he is in, the one that we live in, right, is the false world. It is the world of the theater. It is a fake stage. The people are ghosts in a sense. It is something where what he has done, and again, this doesn't excuse it morally, but it is a way he chose to rationalize it. Because he believed that the real world, the real people that, were being almost farcically impersonated, was a world that he had to get back. He had to play these parts so that he could actually step off the stage and bring back reality. And I think all these things are just so complex about him as a character. I could talk about him for 1,000 years.
You and me both, definitely.
But these are great things you have to acknowledge about him. He is wrong. He did wrong and horrible things. But at the same time, the way he himself has rationalized that and contextualized it is really interesting. And it does make him a very compelling character and villain.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that to be said there, especially during the Evilise raid, where they outright say that Emperor Solus was a huge patron of the arts. So we know he was very much into theater as a person. And I think a lot of that was fed from what Rook was saying, where, he had to play all these different roles throughout the millennia.
You just opened a very uncomfortable possibility for me.
Oh, do tell.
Do tell.
So if the Emmett Selk we know is the result of the 12,000 years of grief that he was under, and that it wasn't until he had gone through that he really adopted that kind of flagrant, obnoxious, theatrical kind of mannerisms that he had. if we go back in time halfway, 6,000 years ago, so we're saying that that's before a lot of that happened. And Amon is already that. Is Amon the original theater kid?
Oh, I love this.
I mean,
I think
did he beat Emmett Selk to the theater kid?
I mean,
because he made them set up
in Circus Tower. Like, they could have very well been in the stands of the room where you fight Ammon in Circus Tower, like just watching a play together. That could have happened.
I mean, yeah, and I mean as well, it depends on how far we want to go back. Like with ancient Greece being an inspiration point, right? Greek theater it's huge. Like, you know, like that is also something, and it played a big role in their lives. So I mean, of course, you could even go into, I guess, a whole discussion or breakdown of analyzing all of this, where they're almost playing the tragic comedy elements or things like that, or like, you know, I mean, there's so many interesting things to be said about how these two are so over the top with the theater references.
Oh yeah, actually, I was just saying Hesperus beat him actually, but if you haven't done Savage, people should know that the entire Savage Phase 2 thing is set up as a Greek tragedy, Greek play anyway, which is amazing.
I had a joke for a long time that, like, when Amon first brought Zande back from the dead, they were like, "Hey, did you hear he did it? Oh man, now they're gonna have to give him whatever he wants." Oh, you can't mean the theater thing. Oh my god, the opera house thing. Like, so, and there's just all these weird little things that have to have happened behind the scenes that I'm angry that I don't see. Like, like Gaius has to be thinking right now about all the things that Solus ever said to him when they were like in a theater box together on like a night off, you know, like that he should have realized something was up sooner. Like when in the middle of a play, you just hear like the Emperor mutter under his breath, like Scathatch or something like that.
The bonus package includes Ultros.
The bonus package?
Not the kind of bonus I was thinking of.
Bonus. Hey, Cobran, was it your wife who said that the history of all Itheris post-sundering can be summarized as Hythlodaeus makes a bad job recommendation?
It was my wife, yes. So everything that's gone wrong was because of Hythlodaeus recommending
it's his fault,
Hermes.
He did everything. He did everything wrong.
And also getting Emmett Selk in the position, because part of Hermes' breakdown was due to Emmett Selk not being very good with people and pressuring him at a very bad time.
Yep.
Bad news.
Maybe he balanced it out by getting his M their position too, like recommending them.
No, that caused a bunch of problems too. I mean, just kidding.
You be a gopher and get some grapes for me.
I'm still remembering the scene when we first enter Elpis, and Emmett Selk and Hythlodaeus look at us, and Emmett Selk just keeps walking, and Hythlodaeus is like, "Wait a minute, you see it too, right?" And he says he doesn't want anything to do with it, especially if it looks like Azem.
That was my brain too.
Oh,
except
so
drop the Azem part.
Yeah, see, that was like, oh, you're gonna go back, you can't interact with anything, and we're just kind of a ghost. I'm like, okay, we're just gonna observe. This is gonna be like a cool, quick little thing, and then we go back. Yep. Yeah, and nothing's gonna change. So it's gonna be kind of like an echo vision, but like what an echo vision used to be in 1.0, where you actually could go back and interact with things.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want a second Warlords of Draenor. Sorry to have the controversial point there, but just no.
I'm sorry, I can't hate Elpis. They gave me Emmett and all that stuff with adventures and dunking him in a waterfall. Like, come on.
I did the exact opposite. Like, I was streaming this whole thing, and I listened to that speech by Elidibus where it was like, you're going to go back and you're going to be there, but you can't interact with anything and you can't touch anything. And the first thing I said was, oh, we're going to mess up everything, because otherwise this could have been an echo. And this is not an echo. We are going to ruin everything.
And then we meet people with top tier soul sight. So
cut to us having a tea party with Mom explaining the entirety of history.
Yeah, and then, we bring the concept of Hydaelyn back. So Hydaelyn has no clear origin and becomes a bootstrap paradox.
Yeah!
Flips table.
Yay.
Flips table.
God, Pandemonium's going to end with us like giving La Habrea the idea for Zodiark, isn't it?
You might say it'll be total pandemonium.
Hey.
Everything will be our fault.
I'm afraid to step foot in that raid because that means I'll probably punch another hole in the wall.
No, you should do it. There's lots of cute guys.
This is the one benefit of being ahead of the curve on deep lore stuff. Like, by the time other people get to the dread that I've been experiencing for years, I'm just on the ride. Like, I'm ready for it. Let it happen.
I'm just expecting the worst now. So
nothing can surprise me anymore.
Like, as soon as we killed those butterflies, I'm like, okay, here's where it gets worse.
And it did.
And then it did.
And then, meanwhile, I'm like, oh my god, Hythlodaeus made me a robe. Ooh.
I just know from all of the RPGs that I've experienced with time travel that as soon as you introduce some kind of like butterfly effect type reference or any type of time travel reference, even like the slightest hint of it, it will ruin a story. The game has to be built around time travel, not include time travel.
Or it has to be planned out far in advance.
That's why I'm saying, like, don't touch it anymore. Like, leave it alone now, because we have that perfect thing in the end of Endwalker when Emmett realizes that I forget what language it is, but he calls himself the keystone holding up this paradox, that he's the thing that makes it work, that he's the thing that ties together all these disparate threads and turns them into one coherent history. And he can't figure out if it's like an olive branch or a punishment from Vana. Either way, he's like, yeah, that's very in character. She always hated to lose.
She's probably laughing at me somewhere.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't English, because that did not come across in English.
No, it's not in English.
She might, they might say that Vana had prepared for this eventuality, something like that.
Yeah, that's the English version. There's another version where there's always one language that uses one word that I'm like, that's the word I'm going to use forever. Mm-hmm. Like in Shadowbringers, Emmett says that coming into symbiosis with the Zodiarch's Aether is what dragged them all under and tempered them all. And I'm like, oh, cool, I'm never going to think of it any other way. And it's the same way here. He says that he's the keystone holding up this cobbling together of time and events, and that without him it all falls apart, and that he doesn't understand why Hydaelyn made him play this big role in her plan, but that it must have been on purpose. And he's very flippant about it in English. Yeah,
it's a practical joke.
Oh wow, 12 millennia practical joke. Didn't we soak him? Wasn't it the River Leith?
Yep.
Lethe, yeah.
Yep. I noted the irony of that, of me dunking him in the memory water where all the memories go poof.
Yeah, that's myth there. They just make you, that's part of the quest line. That's the jeez.
Yep.
So
I was like, oh, it's funny, but this is a little bit ironic too.
Another vanilla aspect for you, Moose. Not time travel this time. Space travel.
Unsure. Very unsure. Like, I think it's on the table in the sense that we have the spaceship now, the moon's a giant spaceship now. They've opened the question of Medion went and saw all these other places, but allegedly they're all dead now. We're the last bastion of hope, but is that really true? Did she really see them all? And of course, we've still got my number one question, FanFest 2014. The Allagons had spaceships and they all died in an earthquake? No. There's a boomerang generation ship. I don't know when it's going to happen, but someday the sky is just going to fill full of Ragnaroks, and they're going to be like, we're back, and the planet's still here. And, Dalaman solved itself. I told you.
So basically, Lufinians, great.
Didn't the Allagons also have interstellar communication network?
Yeah, the hyperstellar down converters. Yeah. They were trying to, and at least Omega made some sense of that, because at least before that I was like, there's no alternative. They have to be out there. And now if they want to, I guess they could write it off, but it still feels like such an open thread to me. And I remember that first interview he ever did at FanFest 2014. I asked Koji that, and he just started laughing. And he's like, I mean, you cut a spaceship off from its support on the ground. How long's it really got?
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Depends on a lot of things.
So you never know.
Years.
And then it's gonna turn out that's the pizza pie on this cover of Endwalker.
Yeah,
there may be a ship out there. There may be other stuff out there, but like, I don't know. Maybe Medion missed something. Maybe she didn't. Maybe the ships got somewhere. Maybe they didn't. So I consider it a very open question.
For me, space is like a huge special interest and something I'm very interested in. There's just so many worlds out there. She can say that she did this, but the fact of the matter is, like, the worlds, it's just impractical to even count them, even in a single galaxy. I also get a little crazy over like, oh, we just traveled there in a relatively brief seeming period of time, and I'm just sitting here like, that's relativistic travel. You're gonna cause problems.
We traveled there in carrot time.
Yeah, I don't care at all about their unit of measurement, I'm afraid.
That's right.
At
carrot speed.
Comparing how long it took Midgardsormr to cross space versus how long it took Omega to cross space versus how long it took us to cross space in the carrot-driven spaceship to like just like Xenos showing up like, hey bro.
Yeah, just flew my dragon out.
Don't remind me. I still like I was literally just going off on this like yesterday over on Aether Radio.
Please, I want to hear it.
But I don't know. I guess one of my least favorite tropes in anything is when you have some kind of plot point that's all orchestrated around like how incredibly hard it is to get to a place or do a thing. So like in this case, it's like, oh, geez, Venat had to, siphon this information from space birds, and then she kept it safe in a crystal for us for millennia, and then she gives it to us, and only that crystal knows the way to the farthest corner of the universe, so far away that, like, we would have no hope of getting there unless we somehow managed to summon a whole bunch of primals and use them as jet fuel to blast us off across space, and, like, everything that goes into this, like the spaceship, a team of navigators that like are these magical rabbits that were imbued with ancient knowledge and that have been practicing for again generations to navigate to where they're going, that blast us all the way to the end of the galaxy. And it's like, wow, the effort that it took for us to get here. And then Shinryu just shows up and Xenos is like, what, like it's hard? And I still am just so angry. I hate when they nullify something like that by like having another character or entity just immediately like nullify all of the effort or things that it took to get there. And I'm sure there are arguments to be made about like, oh, he's used to pursuing you, so he followed your ethereal trail or something.
I was not gonna lie, just about to blame that.
I just absolutely explain it away, but it doesn't hit the same way. It doesn't hit like, oh, we had to work so hard for this, and then they make it look easy. Cool,
you know what?
Thanks.
Though I was okay with it in a way because of the comedy of it, the pure comedy of him saying, "This is your prey." I thought emotion like despair beneath you. Why isn't it dead yet?
I felt an emotion that was just pure anger at that moment.
I'm angry every time they do this. I'm angry every time something is this big, huge, threatening thing, and then the first day that we have hope that it might not be that hard, it's just easy forever after. Whether it's curing tempering with the magic pixie pig, or like shard travel now, or space travel now. So like the Xenos is just part of an ongoing pattern for me. And yeah, I was literally just about to blame like, yeah, he was obsessed with you, so he attuned to you, and this was like him space teleporting to you in a way.
I know, it's just so weird because even then it's like, well, but he's also, okay, so he was Garlean, so he didn't have the ability to use magic, but then he got hyper-tuned, which we still, well, we kind of have, I think, a semi sort of explanation for it. That's still one area where, again, like, I feel as though there's a little bit of wiggle room in understanding exactly what's happened there and what the limitations or otherwise might be. So then he ends up hyper-tuned. So then he's part of a primal because theoretically his will would be strong enough that he wouldn't be consumed by it. So then that primal, I mean, I guess you could make an argument as well that Shinryu being like summoned and an embodiment of despair might be able to sense the song of despair of the universe. I don't know. But either way, it did not land for me personally. And I just don't know. I just didn't like it.
They didn't answer a lot of this stuff about him. Like, I thought he went through the machine twice because the machine was invented to give Garleans magic, not the echo. So I thought like he went through twice, once for each. Like they didn't answer what Fan Daniel implied Emmett Selks did to him. So I mean, I guess we've got he was able to summon back his primal form and then use the primal form to contain all the Aether and then use the Aether to get to you. And I guess we just blame him being able to sniff you out at this point because he does always seem to show up.
Well, I mean, we've only taken really 2 showers or baths in the game.
We're very smelly. I like the idea that he attunes to us like we're an aetherite or something. Like,
yeah,
what happened
that's
behind closed doors, everybody.
We gave him the Eternity Ring.
Like if he has Kryle's echo, then he is like super hypersensitive to ethereal traces and whispers of the soul. So obviously he just like attuned to us when we weren't looking. Like he's going on some theatrical rant, but he's also just like, tingly arm reaching out. Like there we go.
Guys, it was at the dinner. It was at the dinner.
Yeah, there we go. He attuned to us at the dinner.
Yep.
That's
yes, it is.
Drank some of our blood instead of the wine.
Climbs in our body. Okay, I can find this thing again.
Yep.
So
one thing I do want to ask. You mentioned the tempering, and in the scene before we hop on the ship, the stupid bunnies, in English at least, kind of ruin tempering. And I would like to very much get your thoughts on that and where that sits.
Which part?
Basically a tug.
Okay, we went back and translated that one because that was like a big.
Japanese is much clearer.
That was a big thing that day. How to even start? So a lot of what Endwalker did was it listed in multiple places all of the different ways they've used things and how they relate to each other. So when you were in Charleon, the guy gave you a speech about memory and soul in a way that they were able to combine, finally, the soul blender theory and the reincarnation theory in a sensible way. And then we went to Elpis, and Vana was able to explain the multiple ways that they've used the echo that used to be inconsistent to kind of close up those inconsistencies. They even realigned the Traveler's Ward to be separate from the Echo and the Blessing of Light in a way. They really committed a lot to justifying their retcons. And I feel like that this scene was one of the ones where the retcon was more obvious than in other parts. Because I do think it was obvious to at least the people who are like obsessed with the little nuances in the words and trying to figure out the boundaries of things, that the Asians had created a deliberately flawed spell. And the fact that they leaned into that so hard, I thought was awesome. So, but there are also multiple ways to temper things. So there are the ones that breathe on you deliberately to warp you. There are the ones that are leaky, and just standing next to them can make you kind of corrupted of mind and fog up who you think you are. There are ones who are tempered by the act of summoning. And that's the one that Emmett Selk so helpfully clarified for us, was that when you summon, you can't summon something without coming into symbiosis with its wavelength. And if it is much more psychically powerful than you, it's going to overwhelm you through that connection and temper you incidentally through the summoning, which was a line opened up with Gabu and how like that works and the boundaries of it and how strong it could be. And I really think that a little tug, because it only exists in English, is just Living Way being like comedically minimizing of it again. Like Living Way has a real knack for understatement, like teeny tiny toy boat. Like a lot of the things that Living Way says are like, oh yes, this is just a little snafu, and it's like the whole thing is like a whole mess. So in the other languages, they're like, oh, it'll be fine. We're not summoning anything that's like Zodiark powerful, so it'll be fine. And I think Living Way is admitting that if it was Zodiark powerful, it would still be a bad idea.
Yeah, I agree with Moose on this. I mean, it's interesting too because we know, at least now, I think we have more clarification about the summoning of these kinds of entities, right? That they do seem to almost be I've talked recently a bit about like sacred geometry, or the idea that there may be like certain symbols, shapes, inscriptions, flows of ether, patterns, programming, like whatever you want to kind of intuit this as when it comes to this sort of summoning or the like invocations that the ancients did. It does seem like they were almost troubleshooting or like creating a program of sorts, where, you know, you're kind of going like, okay, well, what behaviors are we going to give it? We see in Alpis all of this discussion around, you know, adjusting their temperament, what role they play in nature, whether or not they think that will be sustainable, how they actually work out in the world, even looking at how they reproduce, like all these little technicalities, right? And so this sort of revelation, I suppose, that within that programming, you could create something that would be like a bug or a glitch or a problem within that a false equation that would essentially make it so that they did dominate the aether of others, or, you know, overtake them in this sense, in a way that they are almost like trying to, you know, aggressively go out and convert. So like Moose said, I think there are definitely like different distinctions of this, and I didn't necessarily feel like this was out of line. I think where most of the controversy has been this idea of, yes, like the just a little tug, or, you know, but I agree in that there is a kind of comedic way that these, like, especially the rabbits spin things, and I think especially in English, it's almost as though they are speaking to children in a sense, where, you know, if something is scary, you're not going to be like, yeah, that's the scariest, most intense thing that you've ever witnessed. Like, it's going to be like, oh, it was a little scary, but don't worry, you know, like, I think it's that kind of thing. But as for like the actual nature of how these might be summoned, and then we were even just recently discussing a bit about the possibility about how, like, in this world, I love this point, and I thought it might be interesting to add in, because those doing the summoning are creatures that you know, are not of the same ethereal composition as the ancients were. I can't remember, Moose, if we were yesterday when we were sort of talking about this, that like it could be that almost their dynamis, the prayers, the fervent hopes, the dreams, those like things that seem to get imbued into primals could also be something that's like a reflection of those who are doing the summoning, where dynamis might be affecting it in a way that even the ancients hadn't seen. So like, I honestly do think overall they did a nice job of building off of this lore. And I don't really have a problem, I guess, with the retcon of like, oh yeah, that's why all the creation magic we did and, you know, the guardian forces we could turn into and stuff weren't a threat in our world, but now they are in yours because this one faulty thing that was taught, or because, you know, some of them may have natures that, I mean, I would assume you could probably counteract or deal with. But we even see that the ancients, when it comes to like pandemonium, right, there were some creations that they made that it seemed like they were still trying to figure out, or that posed great threats. So yeah, I don't think it's like out of line.
I am going to get that for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think a lot of the questions in that vein are coming from a camp of people who just really don't want to believe the Asians were that tempered. Like, they're just trying to cling to some of it in a way that they can kind of still use it to their ends. Because this is like one of the things where if there's enough ambiguity, I can shove it in there. But like Rick said, the Asians are just really good at getting new info, new tools, new spells, looking at recent events and being like, how can we use this to our benefit? So it doesn't strike me as odd that Emmett Silk would realize that they've been tempered and be like, hey, we can use that. Because they did that with everything. They did that with the Void. Like, oh, crap, we destroyed a dimension. Well...
Infinite Army? I'm here for it.
You can make lemonade out of that. But yeah, I've seen this kind of thing before where we have a little too long to make up our mind about what we want and how we want to read it. This is very kind of similar to the Heavensward situation where there were conflicting citations about them at first. And, I can't choose what's real for Square Enix. So I really kind of left multiple doors open and watched multiple debates about them. And it turned out to be a little bit of each. So the people who wanted to believe that they only did the things that they did because they were tempered, it turned out to be, well, yeah, they actually were tempered, it turns out, in spite of some of the citations that came out. But also they were tempered very, very lightly and did kind of suck. So it's I think we all kind of get things that validate us, but are also a struggle to deal with sometimes because we've had so much time to think about how we want to interpret it and what our favorite things are, that when we get a hard confirmation, like what's coming through from Living Way and the realignment of tempering, that there are still a lot of questions that need to be worked out, because for a lot of people, it challenges what they thought before and wanted. And it it just takes a while to sand off all the rough edges on our assumptions, I think.
Yeah. Plus, I think, I guess it just doesn't really bother me whether they are or aren't tempered, in a sense. I guess I can see some people using it as a way to be like, well, it wasn't their fault, right? They were compelled to serve Zodiark. And, to that end, they didn't have any agency in destroying these worlds. So again, we absolve them of all their choices and stuff like that. But it is kind of unfortunate because I feel like Zodiark is the crux of this. And I feel like we got really close to almost having a huge subversion of the way we viewed him in the expansion, and then just really did not actually have the time to explore it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That one scene that you get with the martyr, is profound to me. I loved that because we've thought of Zodiark as the big bad for so long, and to think that Zodiark themselves was maybe an entity composed of many, and that if those souls were all still intact within them, almost a protection, a bastion, just as much as they were a sacrifice, and that the idea of martyrdom is very different than what we would assume an evil all-consuming force would be or something, this thing that's destroying worlds and consuming people and, causing these huge calamities. So to me, again, whether or not they're tempered, they all did, their goals were in alignment enough. They structured and created this thing. They summoned it. Granted, it was of a level of power because of the sheer amount of lives fed to it that's difficult for us to understand with the context that we have of strength of primals that we've witnessed, right? Zodiark was truly of a different level, especially when you consider that the ancients were so powerful in ether themselves and so concentrated. But even so, I just don't know if the hang-up for me is whether or not they were tempered. And I think a lot of people spend all of their time fixating on that, when I think the thing that's interesting about this is what was Zodiark actually like? If really we had all these entities, and one of the most sympathetic entities that we know, Hythlodius, who is the absolute opposite of what you would assume a mega villain to be. You know what I mean? It's what really was Zodiark's will then? Obviously reunification, obviously these things were done in its name. And I don't like to necessarily 100% say that, oh yes, all the Ascians are absolved of choice, because I think that robs them of some of the complexities and intricacies that make them interesting, right? But really when it comes down to me, it's more about examining the actual motivations and the entities than it is just being oh yeah, well they were brainwashed or not, because there's so much more at play with this. I don't know if that makes any sense, but to me it's I don't really get why this is the one thing people get so hung up on. There's a lot more to discuss about it.
Now
I agree.
Now that you mention it, I spent a lot of time praising that they didn't try to find a convoluted way to cobble Zodiark together, and they were just oh, it turns out you can't bring him back together. The end. And that he wasn't going to be our big bad. I spent a lot of time praising that subversion and thinking that was really cool. But at the same time, I think you're right that we underexplored the possibility of learning a bit more about how he thought and what he was, because there was something that drew attention to it for me that I'm realizing what was the point in a way now. I'm going to like try to weave it in with that whole like tempering angle. I think some people actually went the other way with it too, where they wanted to believe that the tempering was a little more like Tiamat's, where it was just like the kind of this tingle in the back of your mind. But really, they were really doing what they really thought was best, and were, you know, good people with good points, and that Zodiark was going to be a good guy. And I think a lot of people were. I thought people were like really rallying around that too, and are frustrated with the tug line for that reason. But that the inconsistency that I'm noticing in the tone of the game, now that you bring it up, is that first we have that idea of there and what they wanted and what they expected and how they think and how they approach grief, and that was so strong that it corrupted Elidibus's one job in a very tragic way and ended up tempering the rest. And on the other side of that, we might never have seen that anyway, because Fandaniel claims that the imprisonment and time that Zodiark has spent imprisoned has made him angry and filled with the most rage and power that has ever lived, is what he tells Xenos, that there's something that's just like the, you know, most powerful angry thing ever. So we may never have even seen that, but I think it's like, why even call attention to those two possibilities if we were going to see neither of them?
I think he was just telling Xenos that to get him fired up, honestly.
Yeah, that could have just been a lie. But then again, like Aether Under Pressure. Like Aether Under Pressure always does that, so part of me is like, yeah, maybe, because like that's what I mean, never mind Bahamut. You can stuff an elemental into a jar and they'll do that. Like, it's just what they do.
I do think that a lot of the tempering argument does come down to what at least Emet-Selch does say at the end, where he says, you know, his ideals are inviolate and invincible, meaning whether he was tempered or not, he would have taken the same course of action, to me anyway.
We all have ways to read that.
Because I don't think there's anything in the original plan that goes against Zodiark's will, because Zodiark's will was the plan. So I don't think there's any reason for there to be a lot of inconsistency there. I think there's a lot of like alternatives that Elidibus didn't consider, and ways of thinking that they didn't explore, and assumptions that they took for granted. And I think that butterfly effect wise skewed history in a way that their plan was never going to work. But I don't think that it made Emet-Selch a completely different person either, because they basically tempered themselves to their own plan.
Meaning that to me that removed their ability to be flexible. They could no longer rethink, they could no longer reconsider, which is
right.
Yes, they had this plan, but who knows, they might have reconsidered. They had that particular avenue closed off to them. It's still relevant. It's not the be all end all. It's not the absolute absolution, but it is a factor that should be considered.
Removed their flexibility, I think, is a really great way to put it, because even Vanna's friends were highlighting that they were suddenly very closed to debate and not willing to see some of the risks and obvious downsides and inevitable outcomes here, and that they were just being weirdly rigid. And I think that that's a great way to put it, that they were just kind of closed to flexibility, and that after 12,000 years, it was more along the lines of like, well, yeah, I'm tempered, but if you've got to be tempered, better it be to the one true God. Like, what luck?
And yet, I do think that it's very interesting, the fact that what Hydaelyn tests you on, I guess the difference here being that, I mean, it depends on how much you want to give credence to like the full-on tempering and that lack of flexibility, which I think is a great way to put it. But like, it's very interesting to me that the thing that Hydaelyn tests is our resolve, right? That, you know, you must make this stand and you must be unshakable. And I have waited for someone who could be. You know, was that to try and meet an unshakable force with an unshakable force? Was that like, you know, was that what was going on? But it's, you know, I think the mirrors of this, it's like, these are two choices that were made, which we even get with Emet-Selch's kind of final speech, right? Like this was what I swore to do. This was, you know, my resolution. This was my resolve. And like with that, this moment of, you know, I mean, again, of course, there are bigger pictures and things here that like make this very complex. It can't just be distilled to one thing. But like, you know, we praise on one hand the idea of like an unshakable resolve to save the world we love, when in the light of our hero, but then, you know, condemn on the other hand the same thing for a group that's trying to save a world that was. And the difference here, I mean, yes, being, I think, like you're saying, that idea of flexibility, that the world as we know it is always changing, and that the world that we fight for has to be something that we understand in all its beauty and its flaws, and that we are constantly trying to move forward with, as opposed to preserving what was. So like there's a lot of difference there in that sense, but it's again something that I think is such a beautiful parallel that they set up with this, where I encourage everybody to think more, you know, intricately about it than just like one bad, one good. It's like they very clearly were not trying to do that. So,
right. I think it's.
Sorry, but can you blame the world is constantly changing? I agree, absolutely. But can you blame the ancients when the change the world underwent was so drastic and in a single moment? that's kind of
that's the tragedy of it. Yes.
Yeah.
I think
if it had been a gradual change, absolutely, I would see the Asians' resolution perhaps a bit radical. But the way the Sundering was, no.
I think what we've seen is a lot of like, there is no true evil in this game. Like there's, it's hard for any of the players in this game to do what they've done without having an ideal that they're working towards. And so far, we've only seen ideals be corrupted and hope be misdirected and mistakes have been made, but there's no real evil. And that's why I appreciate that I was saying a little bit about this yesterday, but I appreciate that the final boss didn't undermine Shadowbringers as our real climax against our antagonists. Like that the entire universe was against there not being a universe, regardless of whether it was the Ancients, the Sundered, even Xenos helped. So like, I love that it didn't undermine Emmet Selk as our real kind of climactic antagonist. And I love that it sets us up like, nobody in this game was really bad, but corrupted and misdirected. Like, it doesn't matter whether it was the Asians, the Heavens Ward, Ilberd, all of them, they were all fighting for something. And even if tempering was involved, it just changed the course. It changed the way that it played out. And I'm really just going to keep coming back to that, like inflexible. I like that. I like that for the ancients. They were made too inflexible, and it even explains things like Iggiorm, because like Emmet Selk says, we exist now to spread only his darkness. So Iggiorm, of course, goes to the 13th, and she thinks she's executing the plan, but also she exists only to spread his darkness. And whoops,
whoopsie-doodle,
whoopsie-doodle.
It makes all the characters very human, and I like that. Even the ancients were very human. Except for the people in the Dead Ends, which were like weird, freaky aliens, because when humans get bored, they don't commit suicide, they stir shit, but I don't want to go off on that tonight.
I just keep thinking about Australia.
Mericidia?
No, they started calling the 17th the Land of Plenty, and it just made me think of that song by Men at Work. So now I've taken to calling it Australia.
Praise be to Rala.
Praise be to Rala.
God, I hate Rala so much.
Heresy.
No beautiful end for you, then. Speaking of beautiful ends, we should probably start wrapping things up.
Oh, you don't do a full 5 hours like Aetherite Radio trying to get through a freaking summary?
No.
Wow! Oh my god!
No, we do like 2 hour
sessions.
We do like 2 hour sessions, and then we take 6 episodes to get through one section of the game.
I've moved on to tea.
You've graduated, I see. See, I'm still on the same water bottle. That's my current hydration, but I downed like 2 cups of coffee before the cast, so I'm feeling good.
Stay hydrated, gamers.
I think we should definitely meet up again soon. Or
yes!
sooner, because this is just so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. The hours just fly by. I love it.
I've got like work stuff to work around, but usually it's just as like if I get a DM, I'll be like, yes, I can, or I can't.
Yeah,
Well,
sorry,
is there any like remaining thoughts that you guys have, or?
I don't know. Usually there would be, but we came in and it was like there's no concrete plan, and my final thoughts are usually like thematic summarizations. So no, I think we got it all.
Yeah. Other than again, another huge congrats, 50 episodes. I mean, it's amazing to see all of the content you've created in your time together and all the topics you talk about in this game. Because, I mean, as we all know, there's a lot to break apart in Final Fantasy lore, which is a gift and a curse. So it's great to be back on and to see what you're doing.
And double congratulations on the first year in a day. Because I remember when this first started, you were saying it was kind of like an experiment coming together of, well, we're already doing this, like let's try to do this, let's make it official. Yeah. And I feel like you've crossed that point where if you were going to get over the novelty and burnout, that it would have happened by now. And like, congratulations, first year in a day.
Speaking of novelties, Meowth, do you have something for us?
I've gave that to Fowl.
Yep. So Meowth did some art for us for our anniversary, and I'm gonna change scenes and show it to you guys. Sorry for the noise. The kiddos are being chaotic up there.
That is what kids do. Yes. I've described kids as agents of chaos, and it's very, very true.
Little Asians to be.
Prill. Why did you pour milk on your brother? Oh.
I don't know.
Real conversations I've had with kids.
Wow, we're going to infinity.
The endless loop, yeah.
We need to go deeper.
There we go.
Yeah.
Season 2.
Yep.
Woohoo.
Season 2.
Yeah,
season 2. Once again to Meowth for fantastic art.
And season 2 will last however long this next arc lasts in 14.
Right.
I love it. It's like a vertical Final Fantasy logo.
Yeah.
Meowth was extra special to me and actually drew both my character and Archer Guildmaster Lucien, who I roleplay and play as my main alt. So I play her a lot at the top, and just having them together was like really nice.
Oh, that's awesome. I love seeing all your characters. This artwork feels like so much a part of Lorelines. The style, even the artwork you do for guests, it's so fantastic. So it's great to see season 2's a new look here.
At the previous one, but because I kind of went after the crew saying, if you're going to change your glamour, please give me the references so I can put your avatar.
We were all in Asian outfits to begin with.
Like for 2 months or so, and then I finally got the damn references and I could start working to this, which I actually finished 1 or 2 days ago. So yeah. But I mean, yeah, I'm probably the bored one because I haven't changed glamour myself, but I had to change things for the others. So yeah.
You could have just told us to suck it up, and you didn't, and it was very sweet of you.
Suck it up, and you didn't. Listen, you know me. If I'm going to do something, I do it right. If no, I don't do it at all.
That's very generous to us.
Speaking of which, you have commissions, all right? Am I right?
I do, and I'm kind of
commissions.
I'm kind of in a tight moment myself, so yeah, I can't deny that I do have commissions. So I am. Yes, sorry. I usually feel bad about saying these things, but right now I can't afford being the usual meow self.
You introduced
she needs to self-report or promote rather.
You have bookmarks for sale now, and you do What else?
Keychains and planning to add more articles to the offer, so to speak. But first, the thing that first I have to order them myself to see if they end up right, and for that I need money, and right now I don't have money, so it's kind of a vicious circle.
Yes, the creators struggle. I feel
Yes.
that.
Right.
Thank you so much to both of our guests. It was fantastic having you both today. I think we had a really good time.
I had
I
a
for sure
great
did.
time.
Yes.
And like more than anything, the idea that like you guys came together 50 episodes 1 year, and like this is a thing you would make from the bottom of your hearts just to bring your vision into reality and be what you'd want it to be, and then choose to invite a random lore moose for some reason to share in that space with you sometimes. Like that's an honor. It is such an honor to even be here. So thank you very much for the invitation.
I have to agree with Moose. We are so glad to be here to see what you're doing in this space and to get to be a part of it in any small way. Thank you for having us on. It's a delight to talk with you, honestly. And, I have to also do a special shout out here. Cobb saved my butt the end of last year, sending me a Venat mask when the custom commission one that I had actually ordered didn't come in time for the music video I was filming. So thank you for that little... thank you for being on the podcast because I ended up using it. I mean, it's an amazing mask, honestly. So
and the video's amazing too. If we could drop a link in
Yes.
chat, and for where anyone can see your streams or your content, please let us know so we can drop that in chat and give you a shout out so people can follow.
Also, Rook, because Guild Wars 2 Fellowship, if you ever want a commission, or I would actually be in the mood to give you a drawing of your main character in Guild Wars 2. Just tell me.
Oh my gosh! Well, we'll talk because I would. Yes, Guild Wars 2 Bond here. I know we're betraying this Final Fantasy 14 podcast, but yeah, Guild Wars 2.
How dare!
Yoshida-san has made it very clear he wants us to play other games too. He doesn't expect us to be exclusive, and bless him for it.
Yes.
When
Listen,
you come back, it's all the sweeter.
If this were 14 exclusivity, you would have to bonk me with a stick every time I mention Final Fantasy 13. So
your head would have a permanent dent.
Well,
it's already
not with
up
love.
enough. So yeah.
Just saying, we have the echo.
Thank you.
We had the echo. It should be fixed. It's been fixed for a couple minutes.
Wow, just get rid of our plot devices like that.
That's right.
I'm struggling to get links. I'm so sorry, guys.
It's fine.
Right.
You're good.
By the way, I still have to buy the new expansion for Guild Wars, but I'm
get it.
Really,
it's so good.
I'm really looking forward for it the moment I can get my hands on it.
Well, when you are able to, it is there. I mean, we were #blessed because Endwalker and End of Dragons, at least my two main MMOs, amazing expansions between the end of last year and this year, and I'm like, I need like a vacation just to like recoup after a near endless several months of expansion hype. Like, I mean, gosh, like year of expansion hype. But
that's a lot.
I know, but it's been great.
I'm just looking forward to unleash my Femchar Elementalist Weaver to usher her into the end of Dragon's expansion. Char supremacy.
Yes.
Anyways.
So yeah, we dropped the links
you'd like to share.
Any final words?
I mean, yeah, I'm just Rookery everywhere, except for Twitter where I have an underscore. So you can find me on YouTube, Twitch, all those places.
I mean, I'm only on Twitter at Anonymous XIV and Onwill on Twitch, ANWYLL. that's pretty much all I'm doing right now. But I mean, DM me on Discord anytime, anywhere. If I can't make content, at least I can still have fun conversations.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll close it out here. Many thanks to our guests. We're so happy you're here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Hope
Thank
to talk to
you
all.
soon.
Yeah, take care, everybody.
We're honored to have you.
Oh, it was our honor to be here. Thank you again
Please
so
come back
much.
soon.
Will do. Anytime.
All right, I'll close out. Talk to you next time.
See ya.
And thanks so
Take
much,
care,
chat,
everybody.
for coming to hang out. It was nice to have everybody here.
Yeah, definitely.